Number 10. Miss Sinister. Miss Sinister is a Sinister clone who was implanted into the body of Claudine Renko via a genetic virus. This virus was Mr. Sinister's failsafe should anything happen to him, which of course it did. He ended up being killed during the events of Messiah Complex. Following his death, however, this failsafe was activated, transforming Claudine Renko into a perfect genetic copy of Mr. Sinister, but female. She also possessed Nathaniel's powers and his twisted personality. Claudine no longer existed, and in her place was Miss Sinister. Miss Sinister wouldn't last forever, and eventually Mr. Sinister would return to the comics, taking her place. Although I do think the idea of female clones of Sinister also existing is just a pretty cool idea, and I still kinda hope we could someday see a version of Miss Sinister brought back in the comics. I'm cool with there being a lot of clones of just Mr. Sinister, but what about some Miss Sinister clones too? That could be cool. All of the Sinisters. Sinister dinosaurs as well. Number 9. Donald Pierce. It's kind of weird really that I think Donald Pierce is attractive, but here we are. Now you know that I'm into the weird Victorian aesthetic of the Hellfire Club. Surprise, surprise. I feel like people that do know me would be not surprised by that at all. And of course I'm generally into that aesthetic, except for when it's being worn by Sebastian Shaw, of course. Sebastian is a brute, and I will never forgive him for what he did to Captain Kate and Lockheed. Ugh. Donald Pierce is extremely anti-mutant, but then again, he's also an X-Men villain, and around pretty much half of that group of the X-Men villains are pretty focused on, death to all mutants and that kind of stance. Donald Pierce himself was one of the original members we're introduced to of the Hellfire Club Inner Circle, holding the title initially of White Bishop. He's also part cyborg, which I'm also weirdly fine with. Even robots and, part robots deserve love. Love for cyborgs. This message from Amanda McKnight. Everyone love a robot today. Alright friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more hot villains lists, which as I said, I can do that. There's lots of hot X-Men villains, and I know y'all are gonna be in the comments like, what about this person? So let's do a part 2 and let me know you want that by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister might seem like a weird one to include on this list, but have you seen him lately in the comics? He's a complete A-grade hottie. Something about Mr. Sinister with facial hair, just like rocking a beard, just really does it for me. Also, I love capes, and they're not super easy to pull off, so if you can pull off a cape, I think you deserve a spot on this list, which Mr. Sinister consistently does, so here he is. He's also just a really fun and creative villain, for better or sometimes for worse when it comes to plots. And if there is anything that screams hotness for me, it's creativity. I love creativity. Sure, he might be a mad geneticist, but he's a fun mad geneticist, you know what I mean? Number 7. Lady Mastermind. Mastermind himself is maybe one of the least attractive villains to me. Maybe it's the way that he operates, manipulating people's minds, or maybe it's just his really whiny nature in the original X-Men comics, or the fact that then he really couldn't take no for an answer, constantly attempting to win Scarlet Witch over to no avail. However, his daughter on the other hand, Reagan Wingard, aka Lady Mastermind, is a certified hottie. 1, she's just overall more physically attractive, to me anyways, but 2, she is also less whiny than her dad in general, which I also like. This might possibly be because she is more powerful than him and she doesn't really feel the need to prove how capable she is, so she doesn't get whiny. Of course, it could also be because Mastermind himself has paved the way for his daughter, meaning that her name and her abilities already mean something because of all of her dad has accomplished over time, improving her reputation as a capable villain. So doesn't need to be as whiny. Number 6. Callisto. With or without her tentacles, I'm just a big fan of Callisto. Callisto was at one point leader of the Morlocks and a villain to the X-Men. She kidnapped Angel and tried to make him marry her, not a great look. Fortunately, I think for both of them, that didn't work out, so yay. Honestly, that would be a weird pairing if it had happened and then still existed now. What would that be like in the future? Callisto for a long time has been a recurring enemy of Storm's. However, currently she's turned from being a villain to just being a straight up badass in the comics. She was depowered during M-Day, but still being a mutant took refuge on Krakoa. She now works alongside the Hellfire Trading Company, acting as Emma Frost's, the White Queen's, White Knight. She also recently got her powers restored after fighting and dying in the Crucible ceremony, asking Storm to fill in for Apocalypse as her own personal challenger. Storm and Callisto are pretty much cool now, so Storm actually did this for Callisto as a kindness, if that makes sense. If you're not reading the comics, it maybe doesn't make sense. Kill them not with kindness, but for kindness in this instance. That's what the Crucible's all about. If you want to know more about the Crucible, there's a whole X-Men issue on it from the last series of X-Men that started in 2019. Number 5. Solemn. Solemn is one of the new hotties on the X-Men villain block. That would be fun to imagine, just all these hot X-Men supervillains as neighbors. Sounds like a chaotic good time. Solemn is a mutant of Arakko who, instead of having adamantium bones, possesses adamantium skin. He was one of the sword bearers of Arakko during the Ten of Swords tournament. In fact, he was the one mutant we thought would face off against Wolverine, but in an unexpected turn, Solemn didn't even really fight at all. He was initially set to fight against one of his own because this was Saturnine's tournament and it was gloriously weird. Instead though, Solemn used a favor owed to him by Wolverine from when they both had to venture to Hell to get their Muramasa blades to use in said tournament, making Wolverine tap in and fight on his behalf. Solemn is presented as being a smooth talker, master manipulator, and overall tricksy kind of person. Maybe that's why I like him so much? Number 4. Silver Samurai. Is there anything hotter than a well-trained swordsman and disciplined samurai? Silver Samurai has been a long-time enemy and sometimes frenemy of Logan, and is an iconic X-Men villain because of that. Whenever I think of Silver Samurai, or when I have seen him pop up on Krakoa lately, I always go back now in my mind to issue 3 of Wolverine's 1988 series. In that issue, we get to see him do some training in nothing but his undies and a mask. Oh, and he's wearing wrist bracers too. Gotta protect your wrists. The other thing I really find attractive about Silver Samurai is that despite being a villain, he still keeps to his own moral code, which is why he sometimes will even end up teaming up with his enemies or his rivals. If something is going on that he too does not agree with, he's willing to team up with even his enemies to put a stop to it. He's not too stubborn. And I like that. Number 3. Madelyne Pryor. I mean, y'all know how I feel about Maddie. Madelyne Pryor is probably one of my favorite X-Men villains around, especially because you can't help but feel for her if you know her backstory. Often referred to as the Goblin Queen, a lot of what makes Maddie so hot is just her dominant energy. She is a woman who gets what she wants no matter the cost, which has obviously driven her to do some pretty terrible things. The really tragic thing about Maddie though is that at the end of the day, she really just wants to be seen and loved and accepted, and it's like everything she does to try and get what she wants almost pushes her further away from happiness. She is the very epitome of the quote, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." She's deadly, dangerous, usually very unhinged, often filled with rage, but also very tragic. What is there not to love here? She's just so complex. I love characters that are complex. If you're a complex character in a comic, you're probably hot to me. Number 2. Selene. There is something so timeless about Selene, the way she is often drawn, and even her mannerisms and the way I imagine her voice to sound in the comics. This is probably because, well, she is actually ancient. Something I find very attractive about her is just that, her timelessness, her wisdom. But of course there is also the knowledge that she could drain the life force right out of you, just like that. Selene is an energy vampire who feeds on the life force of others. Her powers pretty much make her instantly a great and deadly villain. An immortal mutant, Selene is also a member of the group known as the Externals, not to be confused with the Eternals. That's a different group. The Externals are an immortal group of mutants who are generally all ancient and are often known for being unstoppable, or at least notoriously hard to kill. Number 1. Mystique. Is anyone surprised that Mystique took our top spot? I know I'm not. For me, it's not even Mystique's outward appearance, whatever she chooses it to be, her standard blue or another version. Mystique is attractive because of her drive. She goes for what she wants and she never gives up. She doesn't usually apologize, and although she's a villain, there are many times she has done things not with malicious intent, but because she thought it was the right thing to do in the end. I love Mystique for so many reasons, but I think the fact that she is a survivor is what I admire the most about her. She often does her own thing for her own reasons, and often to ensure her own survival. There is something so powerful and just so cool about that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's also good to think of others and be compassionate. I'm not saying we should all be like Mystique all the time. That would be a lot, but I think there is something admirable in her ability to completely accept herself unapologetically and trust in her own ambitions and her own plans. For me, that's what attracts me to a lot of female villains. It's like this rebellion against all the constraints of what it means to be good. It's the anti of what I feel like is expected of me as a woman and just a human in general. And it's fun sometimes to like be the opposite of that, you know? Be good, but then also be bad and be free.
Number 10. Domino. Domino is a character that has gotten a whole lot more popular because of her appearance in Deadpool 2. Like before, it was usually just hardcore fans knew who she was, and now, I mean, the whole world probably knows who she is. And while they didn't have a romantic relationship in the film, they kind of did in the comics. And I do stress kind of. You see, Deadpool was interested in her, but not so much her to him. She ended up taking advantage of him, though, to get close to the X-Men. When Deadpool invited her up to his hotel room, she used that as a way to go up, and then she ended up knocking him out. So, it didn't really end well for old Wade, but really, when does it ever? Number 9, Outlaw. Outlaw is actually a mercenary, just like Wade, which is how the two of them met. I mean, what better way to meet someone, right? Sometimes workplace romances actually work out well. Sometimes. Now, we don't know a ton of specific details about the relationship, but the two were always very flirty together. And I mean, they had similar interests, so that tells you right off the bat that they have a connection. And I mean, once you have one thing in common, it can open up a lot of doors. But, of course, we don't know if anything major happened, but Wade was very interested in Outlaw, and it seemed like Outlaw was very interested in Wade. So, yeah. Number 8, Rogue. Yes, that Rogue. Rogue of the X-Men. Although it was brief, it happened, so we are talking about it. It happened when the Avengers Unity team formed. Rogue was leading it, and Deadpool helped fund it. The two of them met, and eventually ended up sharing a kiss. Which, of course, with Rogue's powers, made her, take Deadpool's powers, and she ended up looking like him, and that was basically the extent of their relationship. But, I mean, it's crazy. I never expected Deadpool and Rogue to be even, considered a thing, but I guess in the comic book world, anything can happen. Number 7, Yelena Belova. Yelena is also known as Black Widow during the Dark Reign comic event. The thing is, this is one of those classic scenarios where the guy likes the girl, but the girl doesn't like the guy. At first. Yelena can't really stand Wade at first. But as time goes on, she kind of begins to also kind of like him. Now, this one doesn't go all that far, but it's crazy that Wade was eventually able to almost win her over, to the point where she even started laughing at some of his jokes. Usually people just get really annoyed at Wade with his jokes, but she actually started laughing. And yeah, they even kind of kissed, but it wasn't entirely mutual. But after that, Deadpool just continues to confess his love for her over and over and over again, even if she doesn't express the same type of feelings. Number 6, Satana Hellstrom. As you can probably tell by her name, Satana is the sister of anti-hero Damian Hellstrom, whose TV series is apparently all done, but who knows when we'll actually all see it. It's supposed to premiere on Hulu, but some rumors say that it'll just be cancelled because it's not really part of the MCU, and Disney just wants all the Marvel shows to be on Disney Plus and be officially part of the MCU. But back to my main points, Deadpool and Satana dated. But not just out of love. You see, she lost a bet and kind of had to, so you can see how that one didn't really last long. But they didn't end on the worst of terms. They kind of helped each other out. So, I guess that's kind of something, right? Number 5, Anastasia. Like a lot of Wade's other romances, this one didn't end that well. You see, Anastasia was a tattoo artist, and the two of them started dating after Wade was shocked that she wasn't really scared of him once she saw what he looked like without his mask. Which a lot of people would have been. They dated, but it turns out she was only using Wade because she wanted Wade's skills to kill someone in the mob in order to get money. But Wade found out, and then he ends up leaving before she can kind of hurt him. I mean, poor guy, he just can't seem to catch a break in the love department. Number 4, Big Bertha. Now, this relationship didn't last long, but hey, that's usually the way it goes with superheroes, am I right? Big Bertha was actually sent to get Wade off of the couch and back into the world. She asked him out, and Wade accepted, and was actually really happy about it. But when Big Bertha showed up for their date, she shapeshifted to make herself look a lot skinnier, kind of like a supermodel. And Wade got very angry, saying that he wanted that he wanted her real body. She turned back and then ended the whole thing because she couldn't be with someone who only cared about her body. So yeah, that was the end of that one. But at least Deadpool wasn't actually shallow. Number 3, Orxa. Alright, so Orxa is an alien who was married to an intergalactic bounty hunter named Macho Gomez, who Wade just happened to kill. Orxa wasn't really happy when she found out that Wade killed her husband, so in order to make things right, Deadpool decided to marry her. Then, one of the people that worked with Orxa tried to kill Wade because he loved Orxa, and then she ends up revealing that she now has feelings for that co-worker, so Deadpool ends up divorcing her. Yeah, it's pretty weird, but honestly, it fits for Deadpool, because you can't really see this happening with any other superhero. It would just be too weird. Number 2, Death. This relationship is pretty crazy because, as you are all probably well aware, Death has someone else in her life. Someone very, very scary. Thanos. So you can see how this whole love triangle probably didn't really make Thanos that happy. But Death and Deadpool were together for a little bit. But of course it didn't last. I mean, Thanos even ended up cursing Deadpool because of it. Cursed him with eternal life, which he did eventually get rid of, but come on, it's kind of crazy, and only Deadpool would be crazy enough to go after the person that Thanos is in love with. You would honestly need to have a death wish to do that, but Deadpool is crazy, so it's not really that surprising, right? No, I can see it. And that would have been a really funny storyline to actually see live action, Deadpool meeting Thanos in the MCU. Man, maybe one day. I mean, he did technically kind of meet Josh Brolin because he played Cable and he even called him Thanos once in Deadpool 2, so there's that. Baby steps. Number 1, Vanessa. Vanessa, aka Copycat, will probably be the most famous love interest that Wade has for a long time because of the movies. Yes, she is popular in the comics, but the movies are so big that people will always think of her as Deadpool's top love interest. I mean, she is super cool and interesting. She is very different in the comics though. For example, in the comics she's like a shapeshifter and she's blue, which right away tells you how different she is from her cinematic counterpart. In the film, she is just a human. In the comics, she was eventually killed by Sabretooth, but in the film, she was shot by someone else. Although, after the end credit scene, Deadpool changed time, so it looks like she'll be alive and well again. But I mean, we won't know until we see Deadpool 3 or like X-Force or any type of continuation, if we even get it. But rumors are that we are going to eventually get Deadpool 3, just how it will be is just up in the air because now since Disney bought Fox. So currently we have no idea, but we will wait. It would be so cool to see Deadpool in the MCU though. I feel like that would be the one that would actually work the best because he could still have Deadpool 3 and acknowledge his previous continuity, but also acknowledge MCU continuity because it's Deadpool and he can break the fourth wall and he knows what's going on. So if anything, it would work super well. Let's just see if the MCU will actually capitalize on that fact. One can only hope.
Number 10, Danger. I don't know if it's weird that I find Danger attractive, but as I said on part 1 of this list, cyborgs, robots, androids, and synthezoids all deserve love too, in my opinion. Danger as a sentient AI may be more than most after how she was treated by Professor X, who basically ignored her sentience so that he could keep using her as a training room for his X-Men. Not cool, Charles, not cool. Sure, she rose up and attempted to destroy the X-Men in revenge, and was pretty successful at battling them, at least at first, but I also can't help but feel that she was kind of justified in her villainy, especially when it came to her attempts to do harm to the Professor, who also was exiled at the time basically because of all the things that he'd done that had come to light. Number 9, Spiral. Spiral is awesome and hot because, well, she's a badass. She was originally a stunt woman known as Ricochet Rita, who met Longshot and got swept up in a temporal paradox, which was basically what led her to becoming her future self, the same future self who would end up attacking her. Temporal paradox. Her story is also actually kinda sad, considering that her love for Longshot was what ended up getting her imprisoned, and then Longshot's mind was also wiped entirely of her. That's pretty sad. Harsh. Spiral ended up being heavily mentally and physically modified and turned into one of Mojo's loyal goons. Poor Rita. Spiral also just has a lot going on, and there is a lot about her that one could love. She's a very experienced and skilled fighter, she's jacked and has multiple arms, so she's really jacked, and she can cast spells via specific movements. However, she typically needs all of her arms to be free in order to be fully able to cast spells, as generally their motion and through dance is how she's able to do so. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more hot X-Men villains, so many, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. All the hot X-Men villains. Number 8, Azazel. Azazel is Nightcrawler's demon mutant daddy, who is considered hot enough by Mystique for her to sleep with, have the child of, and even potentially fall in love with. Romance. Yeah, that's right, in case you didn't know or you forgot, Mystique is also Nightcrawler's birth mom. Azazel claimed to be one of the oldest mutants in existence, and is also at times claimed to be Satan, or at least someone who is once in running to become Satan. He and his kind, mutant demons known as the Neophem, actually found themselves trapped in the Brimstone Dimension, the dimension that Kurt Wagner travels through when teleporting with a BAMF. Azazel making babies like Kurt was actually all part of a long con plan to help him escape the Brimstone Dimension, as he planned to use his children from Earth to build a sort of gateway out of there. Sort of Earth Kid bridge, I guess. It's kind of what he's trying to do, through sacrificing them. It really depends on what you're into, I suppose, but I know a lot of people find the devil and just demons in general pretty hot, both literally and also literally, I guess. Would we consider that even metaphorically? Not really. They're hot and they're hot. Number 7, Apocalypse. I mean, Apocalypse when it comes to X-Men villains is known for being one of the most unstoppable. And just for that reason, we should bow down and worship the hotness of or whatever we're supposed to say his new Krakoan name. I don't speak Krakoan, but I'm trying. I'm really trying Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a hottie because of how capable and ruthless he is. He is inevitable, he is often undefeatable, and he is all-powerful. Apocalypse also generally is always operating from the bigger picture perspective. He has big plans, and who doesn't like someone who has that level of ambition? We all would want to rule as the queen by his side, no? But it turns out that that seat is already taken, sadly. But that's okay, Genesis is also another hottie. Another villain hottie. Number 6, Kandra. Like many villains who have come before and after her, I think a big part of Kandra's appeal is power. Why are we attracted to power? Well, because I think along with power comes a certain kind or level of confidence. At least it appears people who have power are generally confident, whether or not they feel that way. Something about that confidence, power, and dominant energy makes us feel safe, even when we actually might be in peril, because these are villains who might be threatening us. And generally, if you wind up tangoing with Kandra, you'll likely end up in peril at some point. At least that is what happened with Gambit in his miniseries. He and Kandra used to kinda be an item, but that didn't mean much when she felt he had betrayed her, and when Gambit found out what Kandra was really up to and how she'd actually been pitting the Thieves Guild and Assassins Guild of New Orleans against each other for years, basically creating their feud. Number 5, Shinobi Shaw. Shinobi Shaw is the son of Sebastian Shaw. Well, Sebastian Shaw I don't think will ever make my cut for hottest X-Men villains. Sorry, Sebastian. Shinobi is a cutie that I think deserves a spot. Shinobi Shaw didn't really start out as a villain, but seemed to become obsessed with inheriting all his father's power. He believed at one point to have killed Sebastian, and took his seat at the Hellfire Club and all of his connections for himself. During this time, he attempted to recruit Angel and Psylocke as members of the Hellfire Club's inner circle, but he failed. Later on, it was revealed Sebastian Shaw lived, and he returned to kill Shinobi, who was then resurrected, died again taking his own life, and later was resurrected on Krakoa once more. And I think that's it. He isn't really a villain in the current continuity, but that doesn't mean that he can't end up as one again. Although I do like him just being a nice guy. That's also good too. I wish he could just be a nice guy and be a villain. Wait, I feel like you can do that. You can do both. Number 4, Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix is one of the baddest of the bad, but hey, I love her, you love her, and you know, we can't help it, because although she can destroy entire planets, she is still ultimately a hottie. And not only that, she represents someone who is identified as being inherently good turning bad, which for some reason makes her more attractive when it comes to her evilness. The Dark Phoenix was initially explained as being Jean Grey, who had bonded with the Phoenix Force, became the Phoenix, and then became corrupted and turned dark. In reality, it was a little more complicated than that. It wasn't really Jean, and it was like the Phoenix made a copy of her and kind of was her. But the major appeal here, let's just ignore all that confusing continuity, does have to do with the basic narrative. Somebody good turning bad. The idea of someone becoming so powerful that they give into that power and kind of become corrupted by it. It's kind of weirdly sexy. I guess because power is kind of sexy. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Number 3, Magneto. Magneto is obviously one of the hottest guys around in comics. The weirdest thing is, I'm not really sure what it is about him that makes him so attractive to so many of us. I mean, I guess Eric Lehnsherr, like so many comic book characters, is very built, so physically there's that. If that's of course what you're into, like I think so many people are. For me, I think the charm of Magneto is just in his seriousness. I would just want to see him smile because he is typically such a strict, serious, and imposing figure. And then I suppose there is also a sense of fairness, and even a kindness to him that I expect many find appealing. Also, he's got great hair. Number 2, Revenant Storm. Revenant Storm was not in fact the real Storm, which is why she ranks only second on this list. However, she is a version of Storm, albeit one that is evil and that exists on the astral plane. We first met Revenant Storm in 2013's Uncanny X-Force issue number 10. Here we also learn that these Revenants that we meet, who appear to be copies of mutant heroes, actually exist for every sapient being on planet Earth. Basically, it turns out that Revenants are like a form of Mumadrai, which are beings who represent the anti-self that must be defeated prior to a person's birth, according to the Shi'ar and their mythos. Why is Revenant Storm so hot? Well, because she's an evil version of freaking Aurora Monroe. Also, that outfit though. Basically, anytime Storm is evil, or anytime Storm isn't evil, I think Storm is hot. That's how it goes. Next time we will have Vampire Storm, Bloodstorm. Number 1, Emma Frost. Emma is admittedly more of a hero now, but for a while before she turned to the side of good and joined the X-Men, she was known as an ally and member of the Hellfire Club, and an X-Men villain. Remember when she swapped bodies with Storm? Yeah, not cool, Emma. And the feud of those two has kind of carried on in the comics even today. Although in Krakoa, both women are of course trying to move forward, and even have worked together as members and allies of the Marauders. Emma Frost is sexy, I think, because of how confident she is. At least that's what's really made me come around to falling in love with her. She is smart, confident, and really doesn't worry too much about what others think of her. Also, all those Hellfire Gala outfits, like damn! Emma was the best dressed at the Hellfire Gala, and if you don't agree with me, we're gonna have to fight.
Number 10, Carol Danvers. While this one never became a tried and true relationship, there was a kind of strange but interesting time that these two went on a date. Now, how did this happen? Well, Spider-Man agreed to do a favor for Carol, but in exchange blurted out that he wanted a date with her. The date itself is super awkward and terrible, but as such proves to make for a pretty hilarious read. You can check it out in Miss Marvel issue 47. Both Carol and Peter struggle to find anything to talk about over a dinner at a nice restaurant. The dinner is then interrupted by evil Hammer agents who are dealt with before the two finish off the night eating junk food together on a rooftop. It actually ends on a nice note, with the two realizing the awkwardness was likely coming from the fact that they were both too concerned with impressing one another. Other than a few cute and infrequent moments of flirting between the two, this relationship has never really been revisited, but it's safe to say that Carol and Peter will always respect and care for one another, even if they aren't currently getting romantic together. Number 9, Betty Brant. Betty Brant was the secretary of J. Jonah Jameson. She and Peter met through their jobs at the Daily Bugle, and after an incident with Betty where Peter, disguised as Spider-Man, saved her life, he realized that he had feelings for her. They dated for some time, but their relationship ended when Betty suspected that Peter might have feelings for one of his fellow classmates. It turned out that this was all a misunderstanding, but regardless, Betty ended up moving on, dating and eventually marrying Peter's friend and co-worker, Ned Leeds, who of course also worked at the Bugle. Despite no longer being together, Betty has always considered Peter one of her best and most reliable friends. Number 8, Carly Cooper. After MJ and Peter's marriage was over and done with, Peter slowly ended up moving on. Carly Cooper was one of the first women he ended up with after MJ and he ended things. Carly was a forensic specialist who ended up going on a few dates with Peter, and eventually, after much humming and hawing, the two ended up as a couple for a time. In fact, it was Mary Jane herself who helped the two get together, making Carly see that what was holding Peter back from committing to their relationship really was himself, and helping Peter to see the same. The relationship didn't last, unfortunately, as Peter's life as a vigilante, as Spider-Man, ended up wedging the two of them apart, and they broke up. Carly has been hot and cold with Peter since then, sometimes his friend and confidant, and sometimes wanting nothing to do with him. Number 7, Silver Sable. These two never really got a chance to explore a relationship, but Silver Sable is definitely a love interest that has become popular with fans. Popular enough that she appeared in the PS4 Spider-Man game DLC content Silver Lining, where sparks between the two characters flew. In the comics, Silver Sable is a well-trained mercenary and owner of the company Silver Sable International. Silver Sablanova is from the small fictional Eastern European country of Symkaria, and is known for being an ally of Spider-Man. She she is one tough cookie you do not want to mess with. Silver Sable only ever flirted with Spider-Man and then revealed her feelings for him only somewhat when they thought the world was ending. Number 6. Silk. These two instantly had a very magnetic and physical attraction to one another. Spider-Man learned that Cindy Moon was another spider person / spider totem who had been holed up in a bunker for years in order to protect her from the villain Morlun. He freed Cindy from the bunker. I mean, she could have left at any time really, but she didn't because she knew the risk by giving her the information that Morlun had been defeated. Both immediately had a strong and unexplainable attraction to one another, which could in theory have been caused by the fact that it was revealed that they were both bitten by the same radioactive spider, which granted them their abilities. They had a very physically intimate relationship during their time together due to their off-of-the-charts pheromone attraction to one another. And Silk still remains an ally of Peter's. Number 5. Kitty Pryde. In the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, a young Kitty and Peter had a budding romance that many fans enjoyed. The two got together after ending relationships with their current partners, Kitty breaking up with Iceman and Peter breaking up with Mary Jane. Most of their time together was spent taking down criminals, and as such, Kitty was forced to wear a mask costume to prevent anyone from recognizing her and piecing together Spider-Man's secret identity. These two were super cute together as both of them are kind of awkward yet charming characters. Like with most of Peter's relationships, his need to protect his secret identity ended up being the force to drive them apart, as this also meant that the two had to keep their romantic relationship secret, lest people somehow use that to figure out that Kitty and Peter were the pair of masked vigilantes. Though in the end, it was Peter getting back with Mary Jane that really put an end to their relationship. Although Kitty never really stopped having feelings for Peter, even after he was dead. Number 4. Spider-Gwen. While Spider-Gwen is obviously not a love interest for Peter Parker, whom this list has mostly been about, she is the main love interest for another famous and popular Spider-Man, Miles Morales. And Spider-Gwen and Miles are so cute together, I just had to include them. Their love for one another is so strong that it crosses universes, with Spider-Gwen being from Earth 65, whereas Miles was originally from Earth 1610. These two met and developed feelings for one another, but decided to stay friends. For now anyways. Although the two did witness a potential future where they ended up married with superpowered kids on Earth 8. Number 3. Black Cat. Felicia Hardy is one of the fan favorites when it comes to Spider-Man's most famous love interests. Black Cat almost instantly fell for Spider-Man upon him chasing her down. She is sometimes a criminal, sometimes a hero, and sometimes a neutral party in the Marvel-verse. The two have dated and flirted on and off for years, but it's usually Felicia's obsession with Peter's Spider-Man persona, her jealousy, and her sometimes criminal ways that gets between the two. Though the two have also broken up over other things, like when Spider-Man was kind of worried about Black Cat's safety as a non-powered vigilante. This concern actually inspired Felicia to get powers, which she obtained from the shady villain Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin. Needless to say, she was forced to keep the origins of powers themselves a secret from Peter, while her powers themselves also made her and Spider-Man's relationship more difficult, as it turned out she ended up with bad luck powers, which infected her enemies and those closest to her, which includes Peter Parker. Just her luck. Number 2. Gwen Stacy. Gwen will always be one of the big love interests for Peter because she was one of his first loves, and the one he lost the most dramatically. The loss of Uncle Ben and Gwen Stacy have haunted Peter for years, and often still do haunt him today. Peter Parker's story as Spider-Man is nothing without that loss and that feeling of responsibility. It is what has weighed him down while also inspiring him to be a hero, and it has shaped him into the person he is today. Originally, Gwen and Peter both bonded over their love of science, and she fell for him. The death of her father caused a rift in their relationship as Gwen blamed Spider-Man, not knowing that Peter himself was Spider-Man. While also resenting Peter for being so absent around her time of mourning, because, he was Spider-Man, so he's off doing Spider-Man stuff. Peter had promised her father right before he died to protect Gwen, and yet, while trying to save her, she died. The fateful panel where he manages to secure her falling body with his webbing is often pointed to when it comes to why Spider-Man blames himself. Whether or not she was dead before Spider-Man managed to grab her, that fateful snap of her neck will always haunt him and readers. Gwen represents for Peter what could have been. She will always make him wonder, inspire him to be better, and he will always love her. Number 1. Mary Jane. Well, Mary Jane may have initially lost out with Peter to Gwen when Peter and MJ were in that school year love triangle. Mary Jane was the character left standing at the very end, and as such, ended up with Peter. But really, what keeps these two so close is more than that. More than just that convenience. Not only is Mary Jane stunning, but she is kind, empathetic, and really seems to understand Peter in a way no one else does. Sure, she can't always be with him because understanding someone doesn't mean you can always stand them, but the two are usually guaranteed to always get back together. Mary Jane will always be there for Peter and proud to know him, and he'll always admire her boldness and her commitment to do what's right. Both will always love one another, and in a way, be one another's heroes.
Number 10. Power Girl. In the World's Finest Comics, Volume 1, Issue 11, multiple worlds being the stipulation here, worlds, Power Girl gets tricked into hooking up with Desaad. He is under the guise of the handsome Michael Holt, aka Mr. Terrific. As such, Karen Starr, while at a party, ends up in his arms, until he reveals his true identity to her. Huntress and Power Girl both see that it is not truly Holt though, but Desaad in disguise, and start attacking him. But apparently not everyone could see what they saw, resulting in them being attacked by guards who think that they are just attacking Holt. Desaad and Power Girl definitely make a squicky picture. Ugh. It was short-lived, but that was all we needed, really. That's enough of that. Number 9. Supergirl. While Supergirl mostly likes to keep her relationships on the good side of things, she didn't start off on the best foot with that. Poison Ivy was actually apparently her first kiss, attempting to bring her over to the dark side, or rather, I guess the green side. The other thing about the issue where this happens is Harley even makes a pass at Supergirl too, offering to kiss her boo-boos better after smashing the hero with a hammer. Number 8. Starfire. Okay, so these two that I'm about to talk about are a pair that constantly get shipped, and for good reason. There's a lot of love between these fellow Teen Titans. Love that gets pretty brutally sexy in the wedding issue of New Titans. Issue 100 of Volume 3 focuses on the wedding between Dick Grayson's Robin and Starfire. It is off to a rocky start as the pair have their love protested against because of Starfire's alien heritage, but ends up being filled with love and beauty. Until a demonic Raven crashes it, that is. Raven has lost control of her soul, and as such has turned pretty evil. What's a girl to do but crash your old friend's wedding, confess your love for the bride, and then make out with her, injecting her with another soul of one of Trigon's children. I mean, hey, if that isn't what true love is about, then what is?
Number 7. Iron Man and Madame Mask. Now, comics love to give heroes a villain to tempt them if they can, to increase the drama. In Tony Stark's case for a while, that was Madame Mask. It wasn't uncommon in early Iron Man for the ladies Tony loved to either be secret or blatant villains. So Madame Mask, Whitney Frost, yes she has another name but I don't feel like butchering it. These two would come to know both of each other's identities and start a romantic relationship. Madame Mask was moved by the concern Tony showed over her face. She's down for people who don't care about her scars. It is sweet, but this would all break down when she had to choose between him and her father, and she found that she just couldn't. She and Tony still have a complex relationship, but it's not as romantic of one. Number 6. Jason Todd and Talia al Ghul. Let's squick you out. Now at the time this happened, Jason was not a superhero, but he would be if you count Red Hood like that, and he was Robin before, so haha, take that, it counts. So initially, after Jason was resurrected officially after the fake out Hush resurrection that would then turn out to be real, complicated yes, Jason would have a backstory of being taken from the streets by Ra's, who was training him to use against Batman, but he was a bit more of a brain-dead husk than who he used to be. Then Talia took pity on him and put him in the Lazarus Pit. She was treating him as a mother figure would. She took him under her wing and trained him, but she would then tell him about Tim Drake, the third Robin, to get him all riled up, and also tell him how Batman had at that time taken out her father, and that she needed him to punish him for her. Then she had sex with him. Yeah, that's pretty squicky. You're like a son to me. Punish your father for me. Nope. I'm out. Number 5. Nightwing and Shawn. So after Rebirth, Nightwing was relaunched, and there was some attempts to give him a new love interest, not Starfire, not Babs, who were doing different things at the time. Someone new. Enter her Sean, who was a real minor villain. The comic even at times calls her an activist. So she would graffiti things, and she was called the Defacer. Is it the Silver Age? Because they want their character names back. In Rebirth, he was supposed to have met her while he was still working with Batman, but despite being essentially a tag artist, she was a match for Dick in every way because of her father. Her big plot with Dick was that she was maybe pregnant. Pregnancy scare. Dun dun dun. This relationship did not end up lasting. Number 4. Scarlet Witch and Doctor Doom. This comes to us from Avengers: The Children's Crusade, a miniseries where we see the young Avengers seeking out Wanda because Wiccan, her son, through complicated retcon, has begun to experience his own reality-altering powers. So he wanted to make sure he didn't, unmake the universe. So when he finds out she's at Doom's castle, he goes to rescue her, only to find her in Doom's colors, which in comics is an instant romance cue. You change your color scheme, you might as well go buy a house together. In fact, when Wiccan asks if she's okay, she says, yup, she's marrying Doom tomorrow. So she's great. Baroness Von Doom, here we come. But it turns out that this wasn't a genuine courtship, which is a shame since the two do have a lot in common. Instead, it was Doom who was manipulating her to be with him in a bid to keep her sane, and keep her away from the memories of her past self, the whole no more mutants thing, also House of M. This was to make sure she wouldn't wipe out a whole species again or almost wipe them out. But Wanda remembers, and actually after a bit of finagling goes back to Doom, but not romantically, but for help, because he's such a master sorcerer and all, but there seem to be some lingering feelings there. But the ritual they have to do turns Doom back into Hot Doom, which we can never have, that's not the status quo anymore. So he poofs out, so broken up, I guess? I would have been down for more of this though.
Number 3. Professor X. Okay, based on my description earlier of Wolverine, I kinda think you know where I'm going with this. You know where I'm going with this? The secret romance between Professor X and Mystique, which many originally thought had to be some kind of trick of Mystique's. We see her giving birth to Charles Xavier II, her and Charles' son, after Professor X's death, but under the guise of Moira McTaggart. Many thought that her disguise could be used as proof that she was up to no good. But we later found out that this was not the case during the reading of Xavier's will, wherein it was explained that he had married Mystique and had actually left his school to her. So yeah. What happened there? We need like a series just to explain that whole romance. It's not enough information. Number 2. Rogue. It's true that Rogue spends most of her time pining after Gambit, who in turn is pining after her, but she's also had a really creepy relationship with the Shadow King. Seriously. At one point he even manages to tempt her into kissing him, though I use the term tempt here really lightly, as Rogue seems to be weirdly into it. He has also offered to have her become his Shadow Queen. What is going on there? But the Shadow King isn't the only villain that Rogue has seemed to have weird feelings for. No. During their time together on Savage Land, Rogue also seemed to express feelings for Magneto. Yeah, Magneto. Though the two had to part ways as Magneto felt they were just simply too different. Not that he was simply too old, which also there might be something to that. Magneto's probably a lot older than her. Number 1. Batman. The ultimate lover of all ladies villainous. Batman is definitely known for his love of the darkness, and apparently this love has extended to the bedroom. He has been mind controlled by Poison Ivy, has had Harley pine after him, fell for Nocturna, and almost married Catwoman and Jezebel Jet. And depending on what you're reading or watching, he maybe did marry Talia, and he also definitely has a son with her, making Batman definitely the one who is spending the most time in bed with those who could be deemed criminals or evil. And the really weird thing here is that he is a master detective, so he generally knows what everyone is up to. So I guess he just enjoys sleeping with criminals. I mean, sure, fair enough.
Number 10. Carol Danvers. Well, this one never became a tried and true relationship. There was a kind of strange but interesting time that these two went on a date. Now, how did this happen? Well, Spider-Man agreed to do a favor for Carol, but in exchange blurted out that he wanted a date with her. The date itself is super awkward and terrible, but as such proves to make for a pretty hilarious read. You can check it out in Miss Marvel issue 47. Both Carol and Peter struggle to find anything to talk about over a dinner at a nice restaurant. The dinner is then interrupted by evil Hammer agents who are dealt with before the two finish off the night eating junk food together on a rooftop. It actually ends on a nice note, with the two realizing the awkwardness was likely coming from the fact that they were both too concerned with impressing one another. Other than a few cute and infrequent moments of flirting between the two, this relationship has never really been revisited, but it's safe to say that Carol and Peter will always respect and care for one another, even if they aren't currently getting romantic together. Number 9. Betty Brant. Betty Brant was the secretary of J. Jonah Jameson. She and Peter met through their jobs at the Daily Bugle, and after an incident with Betty where Peter, disguised as Spider-Man, saved her life, he realized that he had feelings for her. They dated for some time, but their relationship ended when Betty suspected that Peter might have feelings for one of his fellow classmates. It turned out that this was all a misunderstanding, but regardless, Betty ended up moving on, dating and eventually marrying Peter's friend and coworker, Ned Leeds, who of course also worked at the Bugle. Despite no longer being together, Betty has always considered Peter one of her best and most reliable friends. Number 8. Carly Cooper. After MJ and Peter's marriage was over and done with, Peter slowly ended up moving on. Carly Cooper was one of the first women he ended up with after MJ and he ended things. Carly was a forensic specialist who ended up going on a few dates with Peter, and eventually, after much humming and hawing, the two ended up as a couple for a time. In fact, it was Mary Jane herself who helped the two get together, making Carly see that what was holding Peter back from committing to their relationship really was himself, and helping Peter to see the same. The relationship didn't last, unfortunately, as Peter's life as a vigilante, as Spider-Man, ended up wedging the two of them apart, and they broke up. Carly has been hot and cold with Peter since then, sometimes his friend and confidant, and sometimes wanting nothing to do with him. Number 7. Silver Sable. These two never really got a chance to explore a relationship, but Silver Sable is definitely a love interest that has become popular with fans. Popular enough that she appeared in the PS4 Spider-Man game DLC content Silver Lining, where sparks between the two characters flew. In the comics, Silver Sable is a well-trained mercenary and owner of the company Silver Sable International. Silver Sablanova is from the small fictional Eastern European country of Symkaria, and is known for being an ally of Spider-Man. She is one tough cookie you do not want to mess with. Silver Sable only ever flirted with Spider-Man, and then revealed her feelings for him only somewhat when they thought the world was ending. Number 6. Silk. These two instantly had a very magnetic and physical attraction to one another. Spider-Man learned that Cindy Moon was another spider person / spider totem who had been holed up in a bunker for years in order to protect her from the villain Morlun. He freed Cindy from the bunker. I mean, she could have left at any time really, but she didn't because she knew the risk, by giving her the information that Morlun had been defeated. Both immediately had a strong and unexplainable attraction to one another, which could in theory have been caused by the fact that it was revealed that they were both bitten by the same radioactive spider, which granted them their abilities. They had a very physically intimate relationship during their time together due to their off-of-the-charts pheromone attraction to one another. And Silk still remains an ally of Peter's. Number 5. Kitty Pryde. In the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, a young Kitty and Peter had a budding romance that many fans enjoyed. The two got together after ending relationships with their current partners, Kitty breaking up with Iceman and Peter breaking up with Mary Jane. Most of their time together was spent taking down criminals, and as such, Kitty was forced to wear a mask costume to prevent anyone from recognizing her and piecing together Spider-Man's secret identity. These two were super cute together, as both of them are kind of awkward yet charming characters. Like with most of Peter's relationships, his need to protect his secret identity ended up being the force to drive them apart, as this also meant that the two had to keep their romantic relationship secret, lest people somehow use that to figure out that Kitty and Peter were the pair of masked vigilantes. Though in the end, it was Peter getting back with Mary Jane that really put an end to their relationship. Although Kitty never really stopped having feelings for Peter, even after he was dead. Number 4. Spider-Gwen. While Spider-Gwen is obviously not a love interest for Peter Parker, whom this list has mostly been about, she is the main love interest for another famous and popular Spider-Man, Miles Morales. And Spider-Gwen and Miles are so cute together, I just had to include them. Their love for one another is so strong that it crosses universes, with Spider-Gwen being from Earth 65, whereas Miles was originally from Earth 1610. These two met and developed feelings for one another, but decided to stay friends. For now anyways. Although the two did witness a potential future where they ended up married with superpowered kids on Earth 8. Number 3. Black Cat. Felicia Hardy is one of the fan favorites when it comes to Spider-Man's most famous love interests. Black Cat almost instantly fell for Spider-Man upon him chasing her down. She is sometimes a criminal, sometimes a hero, and sometimes a neutral party in the Marvelverse. The two have dated and flirted on and off for years, but it's usually Felicia's obsession with Peter's Spider-Man persona, her jealousy, and her sometimes criminal ways that gets between the two. Though the two have also broken up over other things, like when Spider-Man was kind of worried about Black Cat's safety as a non-powered vigilante. This concern actually inspired Felicia to get powers, which she obtained from the shady villain Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin. Needless to say, she was forced to keep the origins of powers themselves a secret from Peter, while her powers themselves also made her and Spider-Man's relationship more difficult. As it turned out, she ended up with bad luck powers, which infected her enemies and those closest to her, which includes Peter Parker. Just her luck. Number 2, Gwen Stacy. Gwen will always be one of the big love interests for Peter because she was one of his first loves and the one he lost the most dramatically. The loss of Uncle Ben and Gwen Stacy have haunted Peter for years and often still do haunt him today. Peter Parker's story as Spider-Man is nothing without that loss and that feeling of responsibility. It is what has weighed him down while also inspiring him to be a hero, and it has shaped him into the person he is today. Originally, Gwen and Peter both bonded over their love of science, and she fell for him. The death of her father caused a rift in their relationship as Gwen blamed Spider-Man, not knowing that Peter himself was Spider-Man, while also resenting Peter for being so absent around her time of mourning, because, he was Spider-Man, so he's off doing Spider-Man stuff. Peter had promised her father right before he died to protect Gwen, and yet, while trying to save her, she died. The fateful panel where he manages to secure her falling body with his webbing is often pointed to when it comes to why Spider-Man blames himself. Whether or not she was dead before Spider-Man managed to grab her, that fateful snap of her neck will always haunt him and readers. Gwen represents for Peter what could have been. She will always make him wonder, inspire him to be better, and he will always love her. Number 1, Mary Jane. Well, Mary Jane may have initially lost out with Peter to Gwen when Peter and MJ were in that school year love triangle. Mary Jane was the character left standing at the very end, and as such, ended up with Peter. But really, what keeps these two so close is more than that. More than just that convenience. Not only is Mary Jane stunning, but she is kind, empathetic, and really seems to understand Peter in a way no one else does. Sure, she can't always be with him because understanding someone doesn't mean you can always stand them, but the two are usually guaranteed to always get back together. Mary Jane will always be there for Peter and proud to know him, and he'll always admire her boldness and her commitment to do what's right. Both will always love one another, and in a way, be one another's heroes.
Number 10, Kitty Pryde and Star-Lord. This is one of those relationships where there was really no reason for these two to be together. Really. It's just so random. Star-Lord is cosmic, Kitty is an X-Men. I'm not saying the X-Men never go to space, because they definitely do go to space a lot, but it seems like these two only got together because they happened to meet one another in space once. Then they began a long distance relationship. From there things got more serious and eventually ended up with Kitty joining the Guardians, accepting Star-Lord's marriage proposal, but later deciding her and Peter just weren't meant to be because, well, he couldn't prioritize their relationship while also ruling Spartax. Which I get it, when you're ruling a world, it's probably hard to have a relationship, but I don't know, maybe let your partner help you with it? I don't know. Me trying to give relationship advice to superheroes. Number 9, Bishop and Deathbird. I mean, this was mostly just a weird relationship. What do these two characters have in common? Not much. Their relationship was pretty much constantly strained because they rarely ever agreed with anything, and also because Bishop is a hero and Deathbird is a villain, they would even fight against one another during the course of their relationship. Overall, it just seems odd that they tried so hard to make this work when it was obviously never going to. The one thing I will say that was cool that came out of these two being together is that there's an alternate reality where they actually stay together and they have a daughter, Aaliyah Bishop, who is pretty cool, unique, cosmic based, and overall is a badass character. So yeah, I like her. So there's a bit of a silver lining here, as with most weird, but not all weird couples. At least we got a silver lining, so that's nice. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to show it by clicking like, subscribing, commenting, doing all the things. Also, if you love X-Men as much as I love X-Men, we got a playlist for that, so check it out. Number 8, Cyclops and Emma Frost. So actually, over the course of working on this channel, I have come to love and respect the relationship between Cyclops and Emma. I think I actually, over time, have just come to love and respect Emma more as a character. It's like the more I read about her and get to know her, the more I love her. Remember way back when I started on this channel and I said I could only imagine Cyclops with Jean? Nah, those days are gone. I have changed since then. But what is weird about these two together is when Emma kind of cosplayed as Jean and then had an affair with Cyclops in his mind. That was a pretty strange moment in their relationship, made only more weird by Jean psychically walking in on them. Like, imagine walking in on your partner to find them cheating on you with someone who is dressed up just like you. That would be an experience, right? Especially if you walked in on them in their mind. It's a lot. Although I'd also be like, why are you in my mind? This is an invasion of my mind privacy. Number 7. Bloke and his unnamed boyfriend. Well, there are lots of people that come to mind when we first talk about Marvel's first gay relationships and intimate moments in the comics. The very first gay kiss, I believe, came actually in 2001, but it's a little disappointing. Bloke is a new member of the X-Force who just happens to be gay. We meet him first in issue 117 of X-Force, and in issue 118 we get to see him with his boyfriend. But in the same issue, he also ends up dead. So, making it pretty weird that this is where Marvel chose to introduce a gay couple. I guess for some this might be seen as kind of cool because there wasn't really any showboating with Bloke's sexual identity. He was gay, but then he didn't make a big deal out of it, and it wasn't made a big deal out of in the comic. But on the other hand, introducing a gay character only to kill him shortly after revealing that he's gay, that's kind of a weird choice. However, you do have to give credit to Peter Milligan for even putting this in the comic and then for continuously showcasing gay characters in his work. So this wouldn't be the last gay couple that we'd see in X-Force, and likely actually pave the way for making those more long-lasting characters and relationships in comics possible. So it's weird, but it's also not weird. You know what I mean? Number 6. Storm and Quicksilver. Say what? When did this happen? Or more importantly, where did this happen? This is a relationship that comes to us from the universe of Earth 295, also referred to as the Age of Apocalypse. Storm and Quicksilver might sound like the weirdest couple ever on paper, but you have to remember that both characters were different in this universe. Quicksilver was much less of a brat here, as in Age of Apocalypse he lost his sister quite early on, and this was also a much more apocalyptic type reality, which meant more was demanded of him. Storm was still her badass self though. I don't think there's a reality that exists where Storm is not a badass. Number 5. Rogue and Sentry. This one is only half of an X couple, but it's so bizarre I had to bring it up. So you're welcome? Back when Sentry was retconned into existence, it was also heavily implied that he was Rogue's first. And all because he was the only one who could touch her. I have so many questions. And I also feel like we need to stop putting Rogue in relationships with people simply because they can touch her. Physical intimacy does not a relationship make. I know that it's probably been hard for Rogue not being able to touch those that she loves, but that shouldn't mean that she falls in love with someone just because she can touch them and they can touch her, right? Which is definitely what is implied happened here when the subject is brought up during Sentry's funeral and she runs off in tears. Poor Rogue. For so many reasons, poor Rogue. Number 4. Husk and Angel. Husk and Angel are a couple that I have a lot of feelings about. The weirdest part of this relationship that most people point to is the age difference and the difference in experience between the two. Warren is a full-on adult and one of the original X-Men members. In other words, he's older. Whereas Husk is a teenager. I think she was like just 19 or 18, so technically an adult but still pretty young. Still a teenager, so like an adult but a teenager. Young adult. There's also the fact that Husk was this weird rebound for Angel where he claimed he was going to love her forever, but it didn't really last past Chuck Austin's run, and it's never really come up since, I don't think. He had just gotten out of a lengthy relationship with Betsy Braddock, who was going by Psylocke at the time. It was just an awkward relationship, and if you don't believe me, take a look at the time Husk and Angel made up after an argument by getting intimate in the sky above Paige's mom and the X-Men. Yikes. That was a thing that happened. Number 3. Stacy X and Angel. And if you thought Paige and Warren were weird, I have one that's even a little bit weirder perhaps. Stacy X is a mutant who can affect the way you feel, making you nauseous, dizzy, or even really, really really good, using pheromones. She worked for a time at a brothel using her mutant powers. That brothel got attacked by an anti-mutant group and burnt to the ground, so Stacy X reluctantly at first decided to join up with the X-Men, who would help to confront the group that targeted her workplace. She ended up developing a pretty epic crush on Angel, to the point that although she knew he was already taken, she sent him a video of her jumping rope naked. This never really led to a full-on relationship, but it's so wild I had to include it. Also, apparently this is a thing that people do. People on Twitter told me this is a thing that people do. I'm not sure if I fully believe it, but apparently it happens. Also, I love Stacy X, but she is so weird. Like, who sends someone a video of them jumping rope naked? This is a real thing? This is a real thing? What's happening with the world? What are we doing with our lives? Stacy X must have some amazing inner confidence and self-esteem, and anyone that's done that to send those videos. I love that. I love that confidence, I will say. Love yourself, love your body, jump rope naked. I don't know. What are the takeaways from this list? Number 2, Madeline Pryor and Cyclops. I mean, I have to talk about this one. I have to talk about it. I don't have a choice. Madeline Pryor is the clone of Jean Grey created by Mr. Sinister so that he could engineer the perfect mutant offspring, or just the perfect mutant if you will, after Jean's apparent death. Cyclops would meet Maddie and fall in love with her because, well, she reminded him of Jean, probably, although for some reason no one ever thought this was super suspicious or weird that she was a one-for-one copy of Jean. Just a coincidence, they thought. Nothing to worry about, they thought. Well, turns out it was something to worry about when Jean Grey reappeared after Scott and Maddie had their first child together and were married, and Cyclops decided to leave his family to go adventuring with his fellow mutants once more. This ended up driving Maddie crazy, unlocking her true psionic potential and causing her to make a deal with demons. Because that's what happens when someone leaves you. She would go on to have an affair with Scott's brother Havoc and become a frightening mutant-based supervillain. So, not your typical fairy tale ending for these two. Number 1, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. And if you want to get into more awful stuff from the universe from whence this relationship came, be sure to check out Worst Things from the Marvel Ultimate Universe. That's a series of videos we did, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happened. I got a lot more things to share with you. Yes, on the Earth of 1610, also known as the Ultimate Reality, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were a couple. And yes, they were still brother and sister. And it could be possible in this reality that Wolverine, who saw them getting intimate together, was even their father. It was probably still Magneto though, but it definitely doesn't make any of this better. It doesn't make it better. I mean, I don't know what you could do to make this relationship better. Either just don't have it happen at all, or have these two not be brother and sister. Or at least make it so they didn't know that they were brother and sister and this was some kind of awful, twisted mistake. That might help, but no. They knew. They were into it. People joked about it, and then it was confirmed as being a thing in the Ultimate Comics. On behalf of 1610, I'm very sorry about that.
Number 10, Deadpool. Say what? When did Black Widow and Deadpool ever have a thing? Well, okay, they didn't explicitly have a thing, but there was definitely a decent amount of flirting. And I'm not talking about Nat here, I am talking about Yelena Belova. Yelena has also gone by and goes by the alias Black Widow, and as such, I think it's only fair that we touch on some of her love life as such. I feel like Yelena does not get enough love, both in fandom and in comics to be honest. In 2008's Deadpool issue 9, Deadpool ends up fighting Yelena, who is there as part of a team to take him into Norman Osborn. During this fight, the two flirt fiercely, though nothing ever really comes of all that flirting. All in all, Yelena actually doesn't ever seem to have much of a love life in the comics. It seems like she is usually too busy being cloned, being evil, being a successful lingerie model and business owner, or actually helping Natasha out. But there definitely were some sparks between her and Deadpool. Number 9, Doctor Doom, or really Count Otto Von Doom. This romance comes to us from Neil Gaiman's alternate Marvel universe of 1602, which if you haven't checked it out, you need to because it's great. Great writing, great art, just great. Here Natasha is a spy working for Sir Nicholas Fury and for the Queen, but she betrays the Queen and Sir Nicholas and her partner Matthew Murdock because she is in love with Count Otto Von Doom. Unfortunately, when Natasha later questions Doom's plans to sail his flying ship to the edge of the world, she is repaid for her love and loyalty by being pushed out of the ship in response, causing her to plummet to her death. Yeesh. This is why probably Dr. Doom doesn't date a lot of people. Or does he date a lot of people? I don't think he does, really. Number 8, Tony Stark. Okay, I don't like bringing up this one as were these two ever really in love? Well, it's debatable. But in the Ultimate Universe, Tony and Natasha end up married, and Tony even makes her a set of Iron Man armor as a wedding gift. However, it turns out that Natasha's actually still a criminal and was just pretending to be a hero and to be interested in Tony in order to complete a mission. She kills Jarvis, confesses her plot, and then fortunately is taken down by Tony and the nanotech he had put in her, which would have helped her control her suit. I don't mind the relationship between the two before this is revealed. In fact, they're even kind of cute together, but this reveal, while perfectly in line with the darker, sort of more violent, alternate world that is the Ultimate Universe, just kind of makes everything her character is supposed to be about, in main continuity I guess, feel kind of pointless. All in all, Black Widow to me just isn't as interesting of a character when she is a villain. And I know that's weird because I always talk about how much I love villains, but with her, I actually prefer her as a neutral party or just a hero. I think that it's just more interesting for her. A spy who betrays you, as her alternate in the Ultimate Verse implies, should be expected. It's kind of boring. Number 7, Rogue. While these two really only shared one kiss in the comics, I like to think that there could be something more there. At least from Rogue's side of things. She really did seem to enjoy that kiss. Although for Black Widow, she was just passing on information. But passing on information with the real good kiss though. Like, she probably could have just touched Rogue, but she kissed her. Which makes me wonder if there might be more of an attraction between Rogue and Natasha than they'd like to admit. When we're talking about Black Widow's love interests, actually, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people think of her as being a spy and having, a lot of romantic partners, but Nat doesn't really open up too many, and as such, despite being around in the comics since the 60s, has really only had a few serious romantic relationships. And usually with Black Widow, it's serious, or it's work, or it's really not much of anything. Number 6, Hercules. So this romance was actually smaller and less significant than most have implied it was. But although it was random, this relationship definitely happened. It was never as fully fleshed out or expertly built up or written as some of Natasha's other relationships. Instead, it was simply acknowledged and referred to in a few issues that make up the Avengers story known as the Korvac Saga from 1978. It's never explained how or why these two get together, and after a few issues of bickering, they kind of just break up, but it is randomly again referred to in 2010's Hercules Fall of an Avenger. So for better or worse, these two definitely hooked up at least, and then rather than continue or explain this love affair, writers simply just had them merrily go on their way to other love interests. But they still like to come back to it every now and then for some reason. Number 5, Alexei Shostakov, also known formerly as the Red Garden, or Ronin more recently. Alexei was actually Black Widow's husband before she was Black Widow, back when we knew her by the name Natalia Romanova. Before Nat was a Russian spy and assassin, she was a famous ballerina and was married to Alexei, one of the Soviet Union military's top pilots. Without Alexei, Nat would never have even become Black Widow. He was moved to Special Ops, but as such was told that he would no longer be able to contact his friends or family. The Soviet Union told Natalia that Alexei had died during the testing of a rocket, which prompted her to ask what it was that she could do for her country in Alexei's memory. The KGB happily took her under their wing and began training her as a spy and assassin at the Red Room. This story would of course later be retconned, of course. Instead, we are offered in the 2005 Black Widow series an origin story where Natalia is trained from a very young age in the Black Widow Ops program, but has artificial memories of training as a ballerina implanted into her mind. And so if we're going with that version of a story, Alexei wasn't really the man who prompted her to become a spy, as she would have sort of already been trained as one without really knowing it. Still, I kind of like the original story better. Is that weird? Number 4, Hulk. This one surprised many. This relationship comes to us from the MCU, and while it seems to have fizzled out, Bruce Banner's reaction to Black Widow's death in Endgame revealed that he still likely had strong romantic feelings for her. These two apparently were drawn to one another because of their pasts. They both considered themselves monstrous, and it was this connection that brought them closer together. Bruce dealing with his anger issues and Hulk, and Black Widow dealing with her past as a trained Russian spy and assassin, all the red in her ledger that we've heard so much about. Hulk spent time off-world in Sakaar, and when he returned to Earth, it seemed like Bruce and Natasha were happy to see one another, but there weren't that many passionate sparks between them. A lot had changed, and it seemed that the time they had spent apart caused their relationship to fade, though I think they both still cared about each other very much, but just neither one really knew how to bring it up again. Also, Bruce kind of became like a Hulk-Bruce hybrid when he became the MCU version of Professor Hulk. Number 3, Daredevil. While fans of the MCU and Marvel Netflix series may be surprised to hear this one, comic book fans will likely consider Matt Murdock one of Natasha's ultimate love interests. The bottom line is these two just felt really right together, despite being from kind of two different hero worlds. Black Widow is a former assassin turned good guy who fights on a usually very global scale, whereas Daredevil is a lawyer by day who takes his fight for justice to the streets at night, and pretty much sticks to being the hero of one borough of New York, Hell's Kitchen. Natasha and Matt even both lived in San Francisco for a while together. Yeah, Natasha got Matt to move to San Francisco. Pretty crazy. Number 2, Hawkeye. In the comics, these two have had a very passionate romance together and were even almost married. Both were still criminals when they met and fell in love. When Hawkeye defected and became a hero, Black Widow defected to stay with him. So, what happened between them? Why didn't they get married? Well, Black Widow had a mission to complete, unsurprisingly. In many ways, missions are kind of Black Widow's #1 love interest. Natasha is often depicted as being married to her work. She's very involved in making sure she completes missions. Now, the mission she was on this time caused her to have to break Hawkeye's heart, and after that mission was complete, the two never really reconciled and got back together. However, this didn't completely ruin their relationship. They're still very good friends. Number 1, Winter Soldier. I mean, who else could possibly be Natasha's #1, other than her work? These two have known each other since Red Room days and are really great for one another just because they have so much in common. Bucky also seems to respect and trust Natasha like no one else. While Daredevil was often worried for her safety in their relationship and struggled with accepting that Black Widow could, take care of herself, Bucky has confidence in her. He trusts that she'll ask for help when she needs it. They feel comfortable relying on one another, but also trust one another enough to give each other space and independence, which I think makes for the best kind of relationship in any circumstance that anyone could ask for. Trust and respect is pretty much the winning combo.
Fun.
Number 9, Batman and the Joker. No, I'm not talking about the fanfics that I'm 99% sure exist, but in Flashpoint Paradox, it was Bruce Wayne who was killed that fateful night, leading his parents Thomas and Martha on very different paths. His father went on to become Batman, while his mother went on to become that version of the Joker. Now, this was, of course, incredibly difficult for them, especially for Thomas. Being in love with your arch enemy would be so hard. And even though the two split up after Bruce's death, the love between them plays a pretty large role in their dynamics.
Up next, number 8 is Wasp and Magneto. Kind of a cheat here. From the original Secret Wars issue number 3, Magneto and Wasp play a little tonsil hockey with one another. Yep, that's a thing I just said. Tonsil hockey. Many people blame this on Jim Shooter, and his lack of understanding of the characters that Chris Claremont had developed so well up until this point. Anyway, this kiss was only a kiss. And turned out to be a ploy by Wasp to get close to Magneto after he captured her to find out what his plans were.
Number 7, Daredevil. Matthew Murdock has a tendency to dally with women who are living on the more dangerous side of life. Not all the women he dates are like this, just most of them. He's gotten pretty cozy with the former assassin Black Widow, and while she's definitely a hero who just was formerly a bad guy and never threatened Matthew's life or anything, he has also been involved with women who have threatened his life, literally. Echo attempted to kill him before after being manipulated into thinking Daredevil was to blame for the death of her father. All this also happened after their first date. Matt was able to convince her of the truth, causing her to double-cross Kingpin, but still, attempted murder is attempted murder. Typhoid Mary is another woman who Matt began to see before his Daredevil persona came in and just messed that up as well, by becoming her enemy after accidentally pushing her out of a window during a scuffle. Nothing ruins romance like throwing someone out of a window accidentally. And then of course there is Elektra. And heck, even Karen Page in Netflix and Marvel's Daredevil series was kinda shady. Number 6, Wolverine. I feel like being a male member of the X-Men means that you are bound to fall into the trap of falling in love with some kind of villainess at some point. Heck, even if you're a female, you might fall in love with the villainess. But especially if you are a straight male X-Men member. It's totally gonna happen to you then. And granted, a good number of them are straight and male, so pretty much applies to a lot of them. Wolverine, of course, is no exception. As a straight male member, he has fallen into the arms of the famous shape-shifting villainess Mystique, whose charms have allowed her to find herself involved with many male and female mutants. But beyond that, he also had a thing with Madame Hydra, aka Viper. She ended up kidnapping him and reminded him of a debt that he owed her. Out of honor, Wolverine agreed to repay the debt by doing as she asked and marrying her. Wow, that's a pretty big debt. She wanted Wolverine for more than just his personality and looks though. She was actually after his influence more than anything. And her marriage to him succeeded in getting her what she wanted, which was to become the princess and ruler of Madripoor. Later, in exchange for saving her life though, Wolverine was able to negotiate a divorce. Thank goodness. Number 5. Spider-Man. Just like Batman has his Catwoman, Spider-Man has his Black Cat. Is it crazy that both Marvel and DC have superheroes who evoke the look and abilities of a creature, and then both also coincidentally have feline-inspired criminal loves? I don't know. It's definitely some sort of stealing or something going on there. While Black Cat may not be as big of a main squeeze for Spider-Man as Catwoman is for Batman, the two have still had a long-standing on and off again relationship. And just like it's pretty set that Peter Parker will always go back to MJ, he will also always probably run off at some point with Black Cat. Originally a criminal and a thief, Felicia has gone from being a very bad kitty to a full-out superhero, but she always seems to be seduced back into the world of power and of crime. And while Peter may have a ton going on in terms of his romantic life, for Black Cat, he is actually her main squeeze. She often mentions how she isn't a huge fan of men in general, except for when it comes to the web crawler. Number 4. Storm. Aurora Monroe isn't someone who struck me originally as having a draw to the more evil side. Of course, I'm always thinking of 90s Storm in the animated series just watering plants, making plants grow through little localized storms. Despite how stormy she was made to look when using her powers in the X-Men films. Out of context, seeing Halle Berry's eyes go all white and just watch her start creating storm clouds and lightning bolts makes her look like some kind of villain out of a horror film. Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? It dies. It gets electrocuted and dies. So while many of us comic book nerds may now think of Storm as one of T'Challa's true loves, it's no surprise that she has felt the pull towards those less good once or twice. Like the time she spent with Dracula, or better yet, the time that Dr. Doom kidnapped her, and she actually kind of seemed to think that Victor was like a gentleman, and remarked that she was actually having a pretty good time. Remarked in her mind bubbles, but yeah. Is it weird that I ship Doom and Storm? Doomstorm! Make it a thing! I think it could be fun. I'm probably the only one. I'm sure I'm gonna say that and then no one in the comments is gonna be like, yeah, Dr. Doom and Storm, that's what we want.
Number 3. Wolverine. And a lot. If there's one thing we know about Logan, it's that the dude is just a slut. He's been with more than his fair share of women, and he doesn't seem to be too discerning as long as they're hot. Hero, villain, regular person, he doesn't care. He's progressive that way. With so many kids and so many ex-lovers, it's no surprise that Wolverine would have a few villainous loves in his past. And he certainly does, with a pretty strong relationship with Mystique, and even being tricked into falling in love with Madame Hydra. Come on, Bob, you can do better than that.
In at number 2 is Batman and Talia al Ghul. These two have a kid together, Damian Wayne, which I'm pretty sure y'all know already. He's the most recent Robin, so as you can imagine, these two have had quite the history together, with Talia sometimes aiding him and other times not really helping, like with that whole resurrecting Jason Todd bit that she pulled, despite him not being too bad of a dude these days. Anyway, in the story arc, The Daughter of the Demon, Talia and Dick Grayson are kidnapped in a scheme that she and her father Roz had put together to test Batman, to see if he was worthy of marrying her. What all father-in-laws do, right? Surprise, surprise, he is. Then in the Son of the Demon story arc, the two get married. Again, make a baby. She fakes a miscarriage to save him from the heartache after she realizes they can never be together, and the rest is history.
Number 10. Captain Marvel. I can't deny, I actually kinda like this ship, but it still feels pretty out of left field, especially if you're more of a cinematic Marvel fan, and that's where a lot of your knowledge comes from. And even if you're not, while there has been quite a bit of flirting between the two in the comics, I would have never expected either hero to actually act on those flirtations and possible feelings. Anyways, Carol basically had a bit of a crush on Spidey, which has come up multiple times in the past, and both were close friends due to their time working side by side on the Avengers. While Carol herself tends to be a bit more serious and Peter is a bit more silly, the two have some pretty adorable interactions, and they also have a lot of strong mutual respect, which is what it's all about when it comes to romance, baby. They went on a date back when Carol was still operating under her Miss Marvel mantle, but her crush has also come up a few times since then. Spider-Man bartered to get that initial date with her in exchange for basically his superhero help. The date was awkward, but it ended on a not so bad note when both heroes kind of realized they were just working way too hard to impress the other person instead of just being themselves, which is also what romance should be all about, just being yourselves. Also, I like that I did this when I was talking about people having mutual respect. Like, this is fighting. I don't know why I did this, but you know, mutual respect. So we did see them go on that one date, however, we have not seen them date since, even though it went pretty well by the end of it. Number 9. Deadpool. Okay, so this one isn't an official romance, more of a bromance, but it's shipped enough by people that we could consider it a fan-based pseudo-romance, which, yeah, is a thing I just made up now, so that's a thing now. Fan-based pseudo-romances. That's a term. Basically, Deadpool is borderline in love and obsessed with Spider-Man. It's pretty one-sided for the most part, but the two do have their moments, and there are times when Deadpool even inspires Spider-Man, or at least makes Peter consider Deadpool's maybe not as terrible and as annoying as he originally thought. The two have helped each other out multiple times and even have a whole team-up series together, and it lasted 3 years. It's pretty romantic. Number 8. Mary Jane Watson. For this Spider-Man, we're not talking about Peter Parker, obviously. I'm not trying to argue that their relationship is weird, because, you know, it's been going on for a long time. Although at times, that relationship between Peter Parker and MJ definitely can be weird, I would argue. I'm actually talking about here the relationship between the Scarlet Spider and Mary Jane Watson. Ben Reilly, who for a time was also known as Spider-Man. While we don't actually see how their romance plays out in the alternate world belonging to Universe X, it is implied that the two had a daughter together there who grows up to become Spider-Girl. It's never explained how this came about, but the idea of Mary Jane ending up and settling down with Ben Reilly makes me wonder what happened to Peter in this alternate universe. Or is it possible that initially Mary Jane thought this was Peter, with Ben being himself a clone of Parker? I have so many questions. Number 7. Ultimate Katie Bishop. This weird romance belongs to the Spider-Man known as Miles Morales. What's the deal with this relationship? Well, in the Ultimate Universe of 1610, Kate Bishop is not like the one we have in Earth 616. She isn't Hawkeye's apprentice, nor does she become Hawkeye in this reality. Instead, we learn she is dating Miles Morales and is just a normal student. Or so it seems. In reality, her parents are Hydra agents who sedate Miles when he visits and then kidnap him and experiment on him, alongside Dr. Doom. Ultimate Dr. Doom. Fortunately, he does manage to escape and of course decides to break up with Katie before leaving. Gotta love those extreme ultimate romances. So weird. I also like that Miles was like, yeah, so you guys like kidnapped me and experimented on me, so I think I'm just gonna like break up? I think I'm just gonna break up with you, but this was weird. Thanks. It's like a weird way to end your relationship. Number 6. Jackpot. With Jackpot, it's all pretty confusing because we have Sarah Earhart, the real superpowered Jackpot, and Alana Jobson, who is posing as Jackpot and uses drugs to give herself powers so she can become a hero. Here we are mostly talking about Alana Jobson. Alana Jobson, who is posing as Jackpot. While Alana herself is implied as being attracted to Sarah, when posing as Jackpot and fighting alongside Spider-Man, he initially thinks that she might be his ex-girlfriend, Mary Jane. The two of them have a few flirty moments while fighting together. Jackpot even calls him Tiger, considering the name of her character is obviously meant to be a play on Mary Jane's famous catchphrase, "You just hit the jackpot, Tiger." This is also what compels Spider-Man to want to learn more about the new superhero. In reality, Alana Jobson is paying Sarah to use her superhero identity and registration papers, because she just really wants to be a hero. She ends up dying as a result of this desire when the superpower-inducing drugs and hormones she uses together end up killing her when mixed with a blindness serum, despite Spider-Man successfully giving her the antidote to said serum. This romance never really goes anywhere, it just ends in tragedy. Number 6. Emma Frost. This one is pretty strange, but it's also coming at us from an alternate reality, so you know, you kinda just gotta go with it. I think what really shocked me about it though is that Kitty Pryde and Peter Parker were also known to date in the Ultimate Universe, and so I've always kind of thought of Kitty as being, you know, quite younger than Emma, and that was the thing that made me go like, wait, what? So how old? What's happening? So I was just confused in general by that logic, although this is comics, so while in some realities characters may have a greater age gap, in others they may actually be the exact same age, closing that gap completely. And in this comic, that is what is happening. In Marvel Adventures Spider-Man, which takes place in the alternate reality of Earth 20051, both Emma Frost and her BFF Shat Sandoval had a crush on Spidey, and Emma Frost is the same age as him here, so it's not weird. It's a little weird, but it's not weird. Emma, being a telepath, used her powers to uncover his secret identity, and she causes a bit of trouble when Chad and Peter start dating. Eventually, her trickery, however, is exposed, and she's forced to face the consequences of her actions. Here, Emma Frost is known by the codename Silencer, and ends up becoming an ally to both Chad and Spider-Man later on. Number 4. Black Widow. The strange thing is, while this happened in Marvel Team Up issue number 82 as a quick little thing, when Black Widow loses her memory temporarily, it also has been a comic ship in an alternate world where there is an amalgam alternate version of Black Widow who is basically a blend of both Black Widow and Black Cat, which, yes, is one of the coolest alternates for both Black Cat and Black Widow. I know, it's pretty great. The issue where these two, however, initially hook up comes to us from way back before that. How it ends up happening is Spider-Man saves the day for Black Widow, who at the time believes she is a school teacher named Nancy Rushman. The other weird thing is that Natasha has also lost her memories of who she is, but has managed to retain her fighting know-how, and also assists Spider-Man with apprehending criminals, not thinking that it is weird at all for her to be doing. But, you know, I guess the fighting know-how maybe is in her physical memory? I don't know how that all works, but brains, stuff, wiring, physical memory? Spider-Man recognizes her and recognizes that her being enamored with him is admittedly pretty weird, as is the fact that she thinks she's a woman named Nancy Rushman when she's not. Once her memories are back, Black Widow is over the flirtation and basically just dips at the end of the issue. She's like, this was cool, but also not into you. Bye. Only me as Nancy Rushman was into you, Spider-Man, sorry about that. Number 3. Spider-Woman. While this isn't an official thing that has happened as of yet, we have gotten quite a few flirty moments between Spider-Man and Jessica Drew from Brian Michael Bendis' run on The Avengers. They weren't full-on shipped, but there was definitely some suggestive light shipping happening there. At one point when they are teamed up, Jessica even scans Spider-Man to make sure he's not a Skrull, just because she finds him to be so strange. His response was to ask if they were on a date. I guess he's just used to women calling him weird on dates, which kind of makes sense because Peter Parker is pretty awkward and weird. Fair enough. Number 2. Silk. One of the strangest romances that Peter has ever had is with another one of the Spider folks, Silk, Cindy Moon. Apparently they were both bit by the same radioactive spider, which is why they believe they are so irresistibly infatuated with one another. Either that or they just are inexplicably attracted to each other. The whole fact that they don't seem to have control of their physical urge to be together makes this relationship one of the weirdest that Peter has ever had, and kind of one of the most uncomfortable in my opinion, especially as even when they're in danger they just feel the urge to just get physical instead of, you know, dealing with the problem at hand. Like, their attraction to one another not only seems to be completely uncontrollable, but it can also potentially endanger innocent lives, or their own lives even. Number 1. Marrow. Yep, probably one of the weirdest relationships that's happened out there for Peter Parker. There was a random time that he briefly dated Marrow. Why? Well, I don't know, cause comics. These two dated very briefly and even had a team-up one-shot titled Spider-Man Marrow in the early 2000s, which delved into their brief relationship and Marrow's change in personality. Their relationship ended after Marrow realized she wasn't really herself, as she was being brainwashed and used by S.H.I.E.L.D. to hunt down life model decoys. After she regained her memories, she escaped S.H.I.E.L.D., but the two ultimately broke up because she hadn't quite been herself basically throughout their relationship, so that'll do it. Oh, also she was a student at ESU where Peter was guest lecturing as a grad student, and Sarah refers to him multiple times in this issue as Mr. Parker, which I cannot deny I found quite a bit creepy. If you're calling your partner Mr. something, I don't know about that. Seems weird. Maybe that's just me. And we honestly didn't even talk about all of the weirdness in Peter Parker and Miles Morales and all of the Spider people's and man's lives. With Spidey, there's just always more weirdness. It's great. Number 10. Rogue and Iceman. One of the relationships that just didn't seem to work for many readers was the forced comic book relationship between Rogue and Iceman, which seemed to be inspired by the Fox X-Men films where the two were together. I'll admit that watching the movies I personally did not mind it, but of course in my heart of hearts Rogue and Gambit will always win out the day when it comes to both Rogue and Gambit's one true love and romance being each other. So it was very strange when the comics came to echo the films by trying to make Rogue and Iceman a thing. Because while in the movies Gambit might not be around to steal Rogue's heart, in the comics he still very much existed. Like, a lot. But instead it seemed that the Ultimate Universe had other plans that more followed in line with the Fox film franchise ships. After absorbing Gambit's powers and killing him, she ended up being able to touch people without hurting them, and so Rogue decided to touch Bobby. Because I guess that's what you do. Number 9. Richter and Wolfsbane. So admittedly these two weren't really so much a problem together, it was more when they had split up and then Richter was with his close friend and recent lover Shatterstar that things got kinda weird. Although they also had a kind of weirdness that was really well written and allowed us to tackle a bunch of different real world issues within the world of the X Factor series. So it was a good kind of weird really. It was a good kind of weird, but it was still weird. Reign intended to rejoin X Factor after leaving the X-Men and X-Force behind, only to find out that Richter is now with Shatterstar. And to be clear, I don't think Reign actually wanted to leave the X-Force, more she kinda got like kicked out of the X-Force. Sad. Reign returning was immensely offended by Richter having moved on, and by his gay relationship with Shatterstar. Reign actually claims that the child that she's pregnant with is Richter's, hoping to undo his gayness and win him back. The child was not Richter's of course, but was actually Harim Ari's, who had given up his life to save both Reign's and the life of their child. Eventually Richter finds out the truth about this, but in an amazing turn of events decides to still support Reign, despite the fact that she lied to him. And the two actually end up having a great heart-to-heart about just everything that's happened between them. Reign would even later team up with Shatterstar to defeat a demon following this ordeal. Like I said, it's weird, but it's good weird. Cause I also love that like part of the resolution is like, let's team up together and fight a demon. Yeah, that's bonding. Me and my ex's partner. I think it's so cute. Two exes coming together to be friends. Yes. Number 8. Everyone? Everyone in a relationship with everyone. Welcome to Krakoa. A more unconventional, I suppose, kind of weirdness is going on right now in Krakoa that has got a lot of people talking. People are talking about this all the time in comments online. They're like, what is going on? With this melting pot of all the X-Men and mutant history being mixed together, it seems like all relationships are kind of existing at once in a way on Krakoa right now. Relationships are not as clearly defined here. Many characters seem to be weaving in and out of multiple relationships almost seamlessly, as though we are kind of welcoming in an age of polyamory, which I guess makes sense considering one of the guiding laws or principles on Krakoa is to make more mutants. How do you do that? Well, when a mutant and another mutant fall in love. An example of this is what we are seeing in the Summer House, where everyone has their own room, but you may have noticed that Wolverine is also bunkering down with the Summers. Jean's room in the house is actually situated between both Wolverine and Cyclops's, and both Logan and Scott also seem to be getting along better than ever, as though the love triangle has evolved to some kind of thruple, which I'm super into, I gotta be honest. But yeah, you should definitely check out these blueprints, because you can see it. It's like Jean and then like Wolverine and Cyclops on either end of her rooms. And of course this is only one of many different examples that are out there in the comics right now. I personally find it refreshing to see these types of less mainstream but very much real world sorts of relationships getting some love in literature, and especially with very mainstream publishers like Marvel, because yeah, I feel like we don't see that as often. So is it weird really, or is it just great? I want to say it's just great. That's my opinion. But you can let me know your opinion in the comments, because that's also, I like other people's opinions, whether or not they match my own. Let's all share opinions and be friends. You know what I mean? Number 7. Pyro and Jean Grey. In issue 9 of Marauders, this ship happens between St. John Allardyce's Pyro and Jean Grey's Marvel Girl. Of course, no need to panic about how or why this happened, as in actuality, it's not real. I'm not sure if it was Pyro himself who came up with the idea of Jean and him being shipped in this telepathic illusion, or if it was Emma, but I feel like since Emma Frost's the one creating it for Yellow Jacket with the help of the Stepford Cuckoos, it's likely that she is the one who decided to ship the two together. I also see her being like, who do I want to ship Pyro with? Jean, because I hate Jean. No, I don't know. They love each other now. They hate each other. I don't know what's going on. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list as much as I am loving bringing it to you, please be sure to reciprocate the love by giving this video a thumbs up. And I'm sending love back out to you right now, so thank you for doing that. Number 6, Cypher and Bay. Technically both of these two are mutants, but their relationship developed kind of suddenly, which is what makes it so weird and also so great. Once again though, this is another kind of charming and endearing weird relationship. Really, I just love weird things, I think, so I think many of them are charming and endearing to me. Most of them are. These two met during the Otherworld tournament in the Ten of Swords event, and their challenge where they faced off against each other was to get married? If you like me love weird stuff by the way, and if you haven't checked out Ten of Swords yet, you need to do that. It is so amazingly weird. You gotta read it, it's so good. Both Cypher and Bay did end up following through with this challenge, both gaining points for their team. And since then, this arranged marriage between the Krakoan mutant and Arakko mutant has stuck. Hey, if it works, it works. Number 5, Magik and the Death Commandos. So this is less of a full-blown relationship and more of a weird tactical move of Magik's in combat, but it caught me so off guard and made me laugh so hard when I read it that I thought I needed to share it with you, so here we go. Also, anything that allows me to celebrate the awesome mutant series we have going on currently makes me really happy, so I'm happy to bring it to you. New Mutants being one of those series. Here, Magik and the team are facing off against Sybil and the Shi'ar Death Commandos, a group of hired muscle basically. At one point, Magik confronts the team of Death Commandos in issue number 5 of the newest New Mutants run, volume 4, that started in 2019. She asks them if any of them want to make out, and when they reveal that they either aren't interested or they're too busy working to accept her offer, she tells them they made the wrong choice. Apparently, if they had agreed, then Magik would have been cool defeating them with love, but in this case, they'll be dealing with Magik and her soul sword instead. Yeah, they definitely made a bad choice. And fortunately, none of them happen to be human, which means that Magik doesn't have to worry about not killing them as per Krakoa's rules. Some very bad news for the Death Commandos. Number 4, Angel and Psylocke. These two had some super intense weirdness show up in their relationship, and it all went down when Angel as Archangel became the new Apocalypse. Psylocke was his love at the time, and against her will he managed to brainwash her into becoming his bride, despite the fact that he was already with Pestilence, who was also his baby mama. He was like, I'm with you, Pestilence, but I feel like I need another bride, you know what I mean? All the brides gather round, says Angel. You might think, well hey, that's pretty awful and weird, but guess what? It only gets weirder. Psylocke was freed of Archangel's / New Apocalypse's control and attempted to appeal to him, to make him remember the goodness inside of him and revert him back to the hero he was. However, when this failed, she was forced to kill him. Angel, however, didn't die permanently though, but instead was resurrected into a new version of himself, becoming Angel once more. This new version of Angel was a complete refresh of the character, with all of Warren's past memories being lost to him, including the memories about him and Psylocke being in a relationship. His appearance was also back to his original look, except for some reason he still had his techno-organic wings. Because I guess techno-organic wings are way cooler than organic wings, but you know what's not cool? His and Psylocke's relationship, I suppose. Because they cut that part. Number 3, Mystique and Gambit. More of a moment in the comics than a full-blown couple, but still these two together were a weird time. Especially considering that Gambit is often seen as the true love of Rogue, and Mystique is, of course, Rogue's mother. Adoptive mother, but all the same. Already we got a super weird scene where a mutant student of Gambit's, known as Fox, approached him in the showers attempting to seduce him. Gambit manages, though it seems just barely, to resist her charms, and this is already awkward enough as this is a student-teacher relationship, so but it's made even weirder when we later learn that Mystique had actually infiltrated the Xavier school under the guise of Fox, who was never really a true student as this was just a disguise devised by Mystique. Mystique later claims to have done this in an attempt to protect her daughter against Gambit, whom she didn't think was good enough for her daughter, but I gotta be honest, trying to seduce your daughter's partner seems like a really weird way at attempting to protect them. No wonder Rogue is always getting mad at her adoptive mama Mystique for meddling. She's like, this is weird, Mystique, don't meddle this way. This is not a normal mom thing. Stop it. Number 2, Nightcrawler and Amanda Sefton. So this is a weird one, because before Amanda Sefton was known as Amanda Sefton, she was Jemaine Zardos, the daughter of Nightcrawler, admittedly his adopted sister, as Nightcrawler of course was not born into the Zardos family, but was merely taken in and raised by them. But still, it's pretty weird, they're still siblings. Even weirder, Jemaine had apparently always been in love with her brother, but when he was accused of murdering their other brother, Stefan, Jemaine refused to accept that Kurt had done so in cold blood, and sought him out to find out what was really going on. In truth, Kurt had actually killed Stefan, but only because Stefan had, at an earlier time, made Kurt promise to do so if he ever became too dangerous, which was what happened. Jemaine disguised herself as Amanda and did her best to make sure no one would recognize her, not even her brother Kurt, who grew up with her. This plan miraculously worked, and Amanda began to investigate and also date her brother. Oh my. What's going on? Number 1, Juggernaut and She-Hulk. Juggernaut isn't a mutant, and is usually more often thought of as an X-Men villain, but he has also teamed up with the X-Men from time to time, even sometimes seeing eye to eye with his stepbrother Charles Xavier, though usually that's not the case. She-Hulk, however, is not a member of the X-Men, nor has she ever been, and is not a mutant, but she is an acclaimed hero, which is one of the things that makes this relationship so weird. Well, that and the fact that it was a super random hookup. It all went down in Uncanny X-Men issue number 435 when She-Hulk was representing Juggernaut in the court of law. The ship was considered so abhorrent that years later, She-Hulk actually denied that it ever happened. In the 2005 She-Hulk series in issue 21, it was claimed that an alternate version of She-Hulk from Earth 721, who had been on vacation and impersonating her 616 counterpart, was actually the one who did the deed. And She-Hulk stands by that to this day. She's like, it wasn't me, it was an alternate version of me. I would never do that. But people are like, what's the real story, She-Hulk? What really happened? I believe her. I believe She-Hulk. She would admit to it if she did it. That's what I think.
Number 10, Barbara Gordon. So this one has a weird and complicated history with fans. You see, it all started during Batman Beyond, which is an amazing animated series. If you haven't seen it, watch that right now. It was hinted that Bruce and Barbara, aka Batgirl, had a romantic past. Fans really didn't know how to think about that, but they just kind of let it slide, because what else? But didn't stop there. In the animated film adaptation of the comic book The Killing Joke, the two took their relationship to the next level. Now, a lot of fans just attribute this relationship to Bruce Timm, who was the creator of the whole, DCAU, DC Animated Universe, and he was a producer on the Killing Joke animated film. For some reason, he just really wanted to see those characters together. Regardless, I just don't think that this is a relationship that fans will ever really get on board with. But it had to be on the list. Number 9, Chase Meridian. Chase is a psychologist and was introduced in the film Batman Forever. She was played by Nicole Kidman when Val Kilmer was Batman. Now, regardless of what you think of this film, one of the things that everyone agrees on is that they really enjoyed Chase. She had a really interesting and complex relationship with both Bruce and Batman. She eventually figured out, that the two were the same person. She only appeared in one film, but in 2013 she did make her debut in the comics. It would have been interesting to see where they would have taken her as a character and her relationship with Bruce, but unfortunately that never ended up happening. Batman and Robin ended up happening, and we all know how that turned out. Number 8, Talia al Ghul. This is probably one of the more complex relationships of Batman's career, if you could even call it a relationship at all. So Batman has never trusted the League of Assassins. That's not, new information. But he has tried to work with Talia from time to time. But the thing is, Talia wanted a kid, and in her eyes, a kid with Batman would be the perfect combination. They ended up having a kid together, Damian Wayne. Although it's kind of implied that she drugged Batman, and that's how Damian happened. I think all fans agree that this is definitely not one of Bruce's healthiest relationships. Number 7, Wonder Woman. Sometimes office romances happen, even with superheroes. That is what happened here. You see, Batman and Wonder Woman are both founding members of the Justice League, and the two of them spend a lot of time together, so it should come as no surprise that they ended up dating just for a little bit. I mean, they even kissed during the Justice League animated cartoon. And there's definitely some flirtation between Bruce and Diana in the DCEU. I mean, we saw it briefly in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and we didn't really see it in the theatrical release Justice League film. I mean, there were hints of it, but we'll probably see a lot more of it in, the Snyder Cut, or Zack Snyder's Justice League as it's now called. But only time will tell with that one. Number 6, Silver St. Cloud. Silver actually has a really interesting history with Bruce. They both have money, and that's how the two of them met. They started dating, and eventually, she found out Bruce was Batman, which seems to be a trend here. And that is actually why it ended. Silver didn't want to see something bad happen to Bruce. If she was with him, she would always have to worry that, he would never come home at night. And that is something she just didn't want to do. Which automatically makes this different than a lot of other people on the list. I wonder if Silver will end up making her way into Matt Reeves' new Batman trilogy. I mean, he has a lot of other characters coming in, but this one would be, kind of something interesting and new. Number 5, Poison Ivy. So lots of people can't resist Poison Ivy. Partly because she can make men fall in love with her with a spell. And that is exactly what happened with Batman. I mean, can you really see Batman just dating her? They have a completely different view on everything. So it wouldn't really work. I mean, and it's not only Batman she has made fall in love with her. It's also Superman as well. So she can literally make anyone fall in love with her. Unless you have those fake lips on like Batman and Robin, then you're good. Just everyone get some of those fake lips. Because Batman and Robin teaches us a lot. Number 4, Sasha Bordeaux. Sasha was actually Bruce Wayne's former bodyguard. Yeah, even Bruce Wayne needs a bodyguard, guys. She was actually sentenced to Blackgate after her and Bruce were accused of killing Vesper Fairchild, which they actually didn't. But she ended up finding out who Bruce Wayne was, and the two of them actually trained together on multiple occasions. She wanted to become a vigilante, and she ended up going out with Batman to fight crime. Their relationship didn't really last long, but even when she did go to prison, she never ended up giving Bruce his identity, which instantly shows you just how much she cares for him. Number 3, Vicki Vale. Vicki Vale is one of Batman's oldest relationships. She's also one of the more famous ones because she was the one to make her debut in Tim Burton's 1989 film, Batman, starring Michael Keaton, which was a massive success. Vicki is a reporter that works for the Gotham Gazette. Like many others on this list, they weren't together long, but Vicki holds a special place in a lot of Batman's fans' hearts for being the first one to debut on the big screen. She didn't appear in other movies, but it was a big deal when she first showed up in the film. Number 2, Rachel Dawes. Like Chase Meridian, Rachel was first created for the films. Rachel made her debut in Batman Begins, where she was actually played by Katie Holmes, but then she was recasted in The Dark Knight with Maggie Gyllenhaal, which, is the version that people remember more. Rachel has become one of The Dark Knight's most famous love interests because both films she appeared in are considered to be Batman's best films. She was a childhood friend of Bruce who found out, eventually he was Batman. But they couldn't be together until the world didn't need Batman anymore. She then went on and started dating Harvey Dent during The Dark Knight, and ultimately chose to be with him before, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, she got killed by the Joker. It was a tragic end to their love story because Bruce was ready to give up everything for her. But Rachel will always remain one of his most famous loves, even though, it was kind of brief and ended really badly. Number 1, Catwoman. Was there ever any doubt? Come on, guys. I think everyone predicted this. I think everyone knew that Selena Kyle was going to be number 1 on this list. Her romance with Batman is famous. The two of them have had an on and off again relationship for such a long time, and shared a bond that you just don't see with anyone else. They were going to get married, guys. They were going to get married, but Selena left Bruce at the altar saying that he couldn't be Batman and be happy, so she had to leave, which left fans devastated. Come on! Can Bruce ever catch a break? Probably not. Although, some are still holding out hope that they will be together again, and maybe Bruce will finally be happy. Who knows? But it seems like the writers don't want to take him in that general direction because they just want to keep pushing a mopey Batman, which is still a cool version of Batman, but come on. He could be happy. Bruce can be happy, guys.
Number 9, She-Hulk and Juggernaut. This happens during Chuck Austin's run on the Uncanny X-Men, a run that is disliked by many fans, and in it we had one of those reformed Juggernaut sightings. So Jen becomes attracted to him and the two hooked up, and destroyed a hotel room because they're both big and muscular and it's funny. This also happened when she was his defense lawyer. Ethics, what are those? Other writers would not be down for this and relegate it to an alternate universe Jen because main verse Jen would never. I don't know know if we can say that. I mean, Star Fox? Is Star Fox worse or better than Juggernaut? I don't know. What's the metric? Dan Slott would be the one to be like, it's okay guys, false alarm, nothing to see here. But there would still be a gross line of Wolverine telling Jen after she hit on him that he doesn't want Juggernaut's sloppy seconds. Ew. Also, but you'll take Sabretooth's? Where's the line, Logan? I mean, James. Number 8. Nightwing and Mirage. Nightwing over time has developed a reputation for being a hunk in the DC universe. All the people adore him. Him, Dick, not Rick. So during the New Teen Titans run from the 80s, the villain Mirage took a liking to him, but knew she didn't have a shot. Not only does Dick not have a savior complex villain fetish like Batman, but he was dating, nay going to marry Starfire at the time. So what did she do? She tricked him into being with her by turning into Starfire. He had no idea, and then when he found out that he'd been assaulted, the rest of the team called him a slut. Teen Titans go. Mirage was there at first to kill Donna Troy, to stop her son in the future. She was supposed to seduce Dick as part of the mission, but she really enjoyed it. She gave him a mullet and that Deathwing costume. Oh, Deathwing, what a time.
Number 7. Deadpool and Lady Death. As with a number of other entries on this list, Lady Death may not exactly be a shining example of villainy since she doesn't seem to have any villainous intent. As with a number of other entries on this list, Lady Death may not exactly be a shining example of villainy since she doesn't often have villainous intent per se, and really Deadpool isn't always heroic himself, but hey, they're a match made in heaven. However, Death itself is tied pretty heavily in with villainy, so I think she qualifies from body count alone. As many of you likely know, Deadpool has quite a thing with death, to the point where Thanos cursed Wade with immortality just so he couldn't die and be with Death forever. These two have a pretty epic love story, kind of an R-rated Ross and Rachel, and even though they probably won't end up together, I'll always be rooting for them. Get off the plane, Death. Get off the plane, Death.
Up next, number 4 is Captain Atom and Plastique. Plastique was first introduced to us as a terrorist trying to aid in getting Quebec to separate from the rest of Canada. Some intense FLQ vibes there, friends. And you Canadians out there, you should probably know what I'm talking about. She was a failed suicide bomber. Tried to assassinate both the Canadian Prime Minister and the American President. Tried to blow up the Parliament buildings in Ottawa and the Statue of Liberty. Then got captured by Captain Atom, thus beginning their slow burn of a love affair. After joining the Suicide Squad and reforming as a mercenary, that is.
Number 3. Supergirl and Lex Luthor. Now Supergirl has had some intriguing romances, with Brainiac 5, with her horse, Comet. That was when he was posing as a man. But the Lex plot was a bit disturbing. At first it appeared she was with his son, Alexander Luthor Jr., which would have been okay. But then it turned out that Lex was inside his son's body posing as his own son. But this Supergirl was slightly different, she was known as Matrix, there was other Earth stuff involved, it was pretty convoluted. However, Luthor wasn't even with her because he wanted to be with her, it was because he wanted to develop clones of her, which is pretty standard Lex fare, just look at Connor. Clones everywhere. But that's a relationship ender, so she dumped him back in 1994. Number 2. Wolverine and Mystique. So remember when Wolverine was all no sloppy seconds? Well, he doesn't mean it, because he ended up hooking up with Mystique, even though I guess technically he was the first. It doesn't matter, it's still a gross line. The two actually met back in 1921, and she used him in a bank robbery, but these two would always drift together because of, well, their connection and the fact that they've both been around for longer than other people, and will be around for longer than other people after too. They have also moved in the same circles, kind of on opposite sides. They just kind of fall into each other, sometimes, but it rarely lasts. Too much bad blood and history between them. Mystique has her beliefs and Logan has his angst and his pain, and the twain very rarely meet. But this is one that some fans would like to see more of. Would you? Let me know down below. And number 1, Batman and Nocturna. Let's be real, I have a hard time seeing Batman turn down many of his rogues if they propositioned him. If you wrote it right, you could probably get away with it. He really wants to see them get better, to see the light. So at one point in his history, he had a relationship with Nocturna. This is pre-Crisis Nocturna. This plot, oh man. So Nocturna became one of those people who was entangled with both Bruce Wayne and Batman, but she also got into a custody battle with him for Jason. She was a surrogate mother to him and even adopted him. And you know what she didn't do? Sleep with him. Looking at you, Talia. But she didn't want to take Jason away from Bruce, so she proposed the next best solution in her eyes, an actual proposal. The two would get married and be Jason's parents together. Poor Jason, just being used as a pawn. She was actually in love with Bruce, and they did get married. Obviously, it did not last.
Starting us off in at number 10, Carol Danvers. No one really wanted Peter Parker and Carol Danvers to be a thing, but that's still what we got. And in Ms. Marvel Volume 2, Issue 34, Peter asks Carol out, which she said yes to since he had helped her when she was depowered. He was a tad forceful of him. Then, in issue 47 of her solo series, the two of them actually went out on a date at an upscale restaurant, and it is pretty painful to watch, until the date is interrupted by supervillains, thank god. The pair take them out, then end up eating chili dogs on a roof that overlooks the city. Later, it would continue to get weird between the two of them when they teamed up to fight Mac Gargan's Venom, but quite frankly, we're really glad this relationship never really hit the ground running. It's definitely one we can do without. In at number 9, Rogue. In the world of X-Men Forever, which takes place on Earth 161, we got to see a romance blossom between Spider-Man and Rogue. This Rogue had absorbed Nightcrawler's powers, which also changed her to look a lot more like him physically, which did not bode well with her. After that went down, she found herself crossing paths with Spider-Man after dealing with a robbery in New York. Feeling a little lost, she decided to spend the night with him, accompanying him on his patrol, which led to sparks between the two. They actually almost kissed, and would've if it wasn't for being interrupted by the screams of a nearby Jean Grey. Up next, number 8, Spider-Gwen. Okay, so I know we said we wouldn't be talking about alternates of Gwen Stacy with Peter Parker, but this alternate of Gwen had her sights set on a different man in the Spider-Man mantle. We're talking Miles Morales. Spider-Gwen is the Gwen Stacy aka Spider-Woman of Earth 65. Now under the Marvel Now line, she and Miles would get romantically involved with one another. And side note, their Earth 8 alternates even got married. They starred in a story titled Sitting in a Tree, in which their two titles crossed over and made for a story that had our hearts pitter-pattering all the way through. I mean, how could you not ship them? They're so cute together. I mean, unless you're actually one of those people who shipped Miles and Kamala Khan, in which case I am very sorry for your loss. In at 7, Carly Cooper. Carly Cooper is another exception on our list. She first appeared in the 2008 Amazing Spider-Man issue 545. She's a forensic specialist who ended up dating Peter after he and MJ broke up after the One More Day story event. Now the two of them had a bit of a slow burn flirtation before they finally went out on a date together. Eventually though, she would figure out that Peter was Spider-Man, and growing tired of his lies to her, she broke up with him. While she wasn't a superhero when they were dating, she would eventually become a villain briefly, operating under the name of Monster, gaining powers from the Goblin formula that gave her superhuman strength, speed, and stamina. Up next, number 6, Betty Brant. Betty Brant is a civilian character that Peter has dated in the past. She first appeared in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 4 in 1963, dated Peter briefly, but then would go on to date Flash Thompson. But once upon a time, in What If Volume 1 issue 17, she was actually a superhero, appearing in the story What If the Radioactive Spider Had Bitten Someone Else. Now, as you can imagine, in this hypothetical tale, Peter was not bitten by the radioactive spider, but Betty was, giving her his powers. She confides in the civilian Peter, and he begins to assist her, essentially acting as a sidekick of sorts to her Spider-Woman, or rather, the Amazing Spider-Girl as she preferred to be called. And at one point she fails to stop a criminal from escaping, which leads to the death of Peter's Uncle Ben. Now because of this, she gives up fighting crime altogether, but Peter still goes on to become Spider-Man, with synthetic powers of course. Moving on to number 5, Marrow. Mutant Marrow and Spider-Man had a brief entanglement after Marrow was brainwashed to be a sleeper agent for S.H.I.E.L.D. Operating under the alias Sarah Rushman, which, fun fact, was a previous alias of Black Widow's, she had a bit of a split personality, in which Marrow would terminate life model decoys, and then Sarah was a college kid at Empire State University. That's where she developed a crush on Peter, who was lecturing there, and the two ended up going out on a few dates before he realized who she truly was. Eventually that would dissipate, with Parker helping her break free from S.H.I.E.L.D.'s control by faking her own suicide in a Spider-Man Marrow one-shot crossover from 2001. Up next at 4, Silk. Silk, aka Cindy Moon, first hit the scene in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 1 volume 3. The character was bitten by the same radioactive spider as Peter was, but from there on out suffered a different kind of tragic origin story than what Parker had endured. She was kidnapped and forced to train inside of a bunker, where she was held captive by a mysterious man named Ezekiel in an attempt to hide her from Morlun, who was killing off spider-powered peeps. Eventually Peter learned of her existence, and when she was free, the two couldn't help but notice that they were super attracted to one another, unnaturally so. It was intense. Turns out it was actually a product of their pheromones, with the two of them overcome by primal urges to jump each other's bones. They eventually had to part ways because these urges were just too strong and too overwhelming, hindering their efforts to fight crime and just exist. Cindy would go on to begin her own costume superhero career separate of Peter. In at number 3, Kitty Pryde. Peter's relationship with Kitty Pryde isn't one that took place in the 616 universe, but rather on Earth 1610, in the Ultimate Universe. During Ultimate Comics Spider-Man, Kitty develops a crush on Peter when Spider-Man and the X-Men team up in Queens to take down the Latverian mutant Geldof. After being charmed by the web-slinger, Kitty asked him out on a date. Over the course of their relationship, they would work together to take on villains, and eventually Peter started to feel some tension about the fact that Kitty's X-Men persona was way more public versus the secret identity that he had been striving to maintain. Eventually though, the two break up, which did not go smoothly. But luckily over time they made amends, with them even becoming good friends after the fact. And at number 2, Silver Sable. A sometimes antagonist, sometimes ally of Spider-Man's, Silver Sable, who was introduced in 1985 to the Amazing Spider-Man issue 265, has never hooked up romantically with Peter in the 616, but there's certainly been lots of tension and flirtation to say the least. But we did get to see a glimpse of what that underlying sexual tension could amount to in What If Volume 2 issue 21, which was titled, What If Spider-Man Had Married the Black Cat? Now in this story, Black Cat is accidentally murdered by Paladin, and Spider-Man ends up getting romantically involved with Silver Sable in the aftermath. They both bond over the grief they share of their dead loved ones. By the end, it is a bit ambiguous as to whether or not their relationship worked out in the long run. And last but not least, speaking of, we have Black Cat at number 1. Black Cat, aka Felicia Hardy, may have originally been a villain of Spider-Man's, now an anti-hero, but if anything, her criminality made the romantic relationship between her and Peter Parker that much more steamier. Created by Marv Wolfman and Keith Pollard in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 194, Felicia actually chose to become more of an anti-hero because of her relationship with Spider-Man, even becoming his partner for a while. Although, she didn't care much for Peter Parker the civilian. She was way more into Spider-Man the vigilante, and one of the reasons why the two would split up was because of this. Now they've had an on-again, off-again relationship over the years, with Black Cat working as one of Spidey's biggest allies at their best, and her slipping back into the life of a criminal when they've been at their worst. Although that relationship between the two of them may have been tipped permanently into negative land, thanks to Otto Octavius running around in Peter's body as the superior Spider-Man, having broken Black Cat's teeth and abandoned her for the police to pick up. Yeah, definitely something that would make someone not want to be into you. Just saying.